Hey everybody, I am back. It is so good to be streaming again. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. I'm glad to be back. I've got a lot to say, as you can imagine, and I'm sure you all have a lot to say to me. So let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action. Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be back. I am absolutely glad to be back. And wow, a lot to catch you up on, a lot to comment on, etc. First things first, we always, the way we do these streams, first opening remarks, then I do a roll call. We find out who is on the other side of the question, of the camera. We do the roll call, names and locations. Then after that, I answer your super chat questions for the remainder of the night. So if you have something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, all you need to do is send a super chat on YouTube or a Rumble rant on Rumble. If you're watching on Facebook and you want to ask a question, you need to go to Rumble or you need to go to YouTube and send a super chat or a Rumble rant. I cannot see the Facebook. That's just not the way it works. So a quick announcement, just one announcement tonight. But it's a big announcement. The Center for Political Innovation is back in business. We are open for membership once again. We have a whole new website. cpiusa.org. And on that whole new website, you can join. You can become a dues-paying member of the organization once again. We have reincorporated. We have changed. We are back in business, and I'll say more about that later tonight. But go and check out our new and improved website. It is just the beginning of a lot of really exciting things that are in the works. And I'm going to tell you about some of them tonight. But yeah, that's the big announcement for tonight. New website. There you go. So like I said, opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I'll answer questions for the remainder of the show. Folks, I have never been more relieved by an election result in my life. I really have never been more relieved by an election result in my life. And I got to tell you, I took this time off. And during this time off, I went to Oklahoma and I sat down with members of our organization and we made a 90-day action plan for the Center for Political Innovation. And we are marching ahead. And the first step was redesigning our website from scratch. Now the website is back up. And from there, a number of things are happening. You will be hearing about one of them probably tomorrow. A number of things are happening. And I guess I don't have to get into all of that at the moment. I'm going to tell you what I think of the election. First of all, folks, we did it. We did it. I wrote this book 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I wrote this book. Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an essay in 3 parts. I wrote it in 2020, in September of 2020, and I warned that the Hillary Clinton State Department and the deep state faction behind it, Anne Marie Slaughter and Samantha Power, they were the faction that was behind Kamala Harris, that had selected Kamala Harris to be the vice president, and eventually they wanted her to be the president of the United States. And that they did it because they knew how psychologically damaged she was and how easy it was to push her buttons. And because of that, they would do everything in their power to get her into the White House, despite the fact that the American people didn't want her. And my book ruffled a few feathers because I wrote it in 2020 and it got reviewed in the Morning Star, communist newspaper in the United Kingdom. It got reviewed in a couple newspapers in India. And that was it. You know, I spoke at the Center for Marxist Education. They had a web Zoom where I gave a lecture based on my book, did some interviews about it on Sputnik Radio. I sold, prior to July of this year, I had sold only 500 copies, just over 500 copies of this book. But then something happened on July 22nd. And what happened was that Kamala Harris became the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee. Joe Biden announced on Sunday, July 21st, that he was dropping out of the race. Monday, July 22nd, Kamala Harris was announced by the media as the presumptive nominee. And at that point, this book that had been on sale and sold only 500 or so copies was banned from Amazon.com with no explanation given. They said it was an issue with the cover, and then I submitted it with a blank cover, denied. Submitted it again an hour later, denied. Submitted, and they would shoot it right back to me. And for 7 days, this book was banned from Amazon. So what did I do? I went to Lulu, started selling it on Lulu. And then after 3 days, Lulu stopped processing transactions for it. And then the following Monday, 7 days after Amazon banned it, suddenly Lulu was processing transactions and Amazon restored the book as if nothing had happened. And you know, I have been selling books on Amazon for a long time. And usually when there's an issue, what happens is the book remains on Amazon, but then they just say currently unavailable. Not this book. This book, they wiped it like it never existed. The links were dead. It was completely gone. And then they published, this is amazing. They published another book on the same day with a very similar title that was pro Kamala Harris. It was crazy. I had never seen anything like it. And then Max Blumenthal spoke up and tweeted about how it looked like the call to ban this book came from the White House. And Jimmy Dore spoke up, and Kim Iverson spoke up, and Candace Taylor spoke up, and InfoWars spoke up, and this book exploded. And I am now proud to say that between July and today, over 4,000 copies of this book have sold. Now, you might wonder if this book really changed the conversation around Kamala Harris. You might ask that question. And if you want to ask that question, you're totally free to do so. I cannot stop you from asking that question. But I do want to point out to you that 2 years after I published this book, there was a very, very interesting statement made on Roger Stone's podcast. And that statement is quite interesting in light of today, folks. I'm just catching you all up. We are in the middle of history right now. We are not passive observers in history, folks. We are in the middle of history. If you are in the Center for Political Innovation and you are part of our movement, you are involved in history. You are an active participant in history. So this, 2 years later, Roger Stone for the Epoch Times, Trevor Loudon, on his podcast. And this is what he said.
Really there to promote Russian and North Korean foreign policies. She may not understand that, but she's being used by people like Dennis Kucinich and others to do that. She also has some connections to the Center for Political Innovation, which is a very pro-Russian outfit run by a man called Caleb Maupin.
Trevor Loudon announced on Roger Stone's podcast that Tulsi Gabbert has connections to the Center for Political Innovation and myself. Now, I've met Tulsi Gabbert. She's a nice person. I was very impressed with her. But then you will notice that Tulsi Gabbert in the following year started doing interviews about Kamala Harris. She started talking about Kamala Harris's personality. And she started talking about how Kamala Harris might want to prove herself by starting a big war. And how she might want to stand up with the big boys. And how she thinks she's a victim. And it became very, very clear to me that Kamala Harris had read my book. I'm sorry. That Tulsi Gabbert had read my book. I also found out from somebody else that Kamala Harris's staff had also read my book, that there was a copy of this in the vice presidential office. That got back to me as well through someone I know who's related to somebody who used to work with, I'm not going to get into details, but I also knew that her staff had a copy of this book. Kamala Harris's staff at least read this book. But then I found out that Tulsi Gabbert very clearly had read this book. And then I saw the podcast saying that I had an influence, that she had connections with the Center for Political Innovation. And we started the narrative about who Kamala Harris really is. And this book that talked about the parents that were locked up for truancy, this book that drew from Reason Magazine's research into Kamala Harris and the drug labs, this book started a conversation. And this book was so threatening to Kamala Harris that somebody made a phone call to Amazon. And on the day she became the nominee, they said, pull it, pull it, pull it. And this book was yanked from Amazon. And after 7 days, after I went on the Jimmy Dore show, after I went on InfoWars, after I went on the Kim Iverson show, after I went on George Galloway, as I was talking about this book that they did not want you to read, they figured Streisand effect, and they put it back. And they referenced it just yesterday on the Jimmy Dore show. Russell from Due Dissidence was hosting the Jimmy Dore show, and he referenced my book. This is
Well, it did go through a test in 2019 to see how electable she was, right, and she couldn't even make it to state one.
And you insisted on, according to Caleb Maupin, his excellent book about Kamala Harris, he says on the original speakers lineup for the DNC, there was a slot for Kamala Harris and there was a slot for VP. So somebody or somebody's leaned on Joe Biden and made, we know what a nasty, vindictive bastard Joe Biden is. There's no way that he would have picked that little girl is me person for his VP on general principles. They forced her on him. Why? That is the elite arrogance of these people. The voters didn't want her. Well, you know what? You're going to get her anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And our book, we were ahead of the game in exposing Kamala Harris, exposing her personality profile, how dangerous she is. And why did I write the book? Well, I wrote the book because I met somebody who worked with her father in a professional capacity. And that person that I met informed me that her father was a communist, was an active communist at the time he knew him. He was studying to get his degree in economics, and he was going to become an economics professor, and he was an active member of a communist group. I don't know which one. It was the SWP or the CPUSA or the Progressive Labor Party, one of the groups that was active in the Bay Area during the early 60s. He was a member of. He was an active communist, and that he's estranged from her. And that led me on an intellectual journey. And I read Donald Harris's touching essay, Reflections of a Jamaican Father. And I read about Kamala Harris's career as a vicious prosecutor in Reason magazine. And I read so much, and I studied the Hillary Clinton State Department and Anne Marie Slaughter, and I wrote a book that is really not that much of, it's about Kamala Harris. I use her to make 3 political points. But this book had a huge impact on the conversation. This book, this Center for Political Innovation book, changed the conversation like you wouldn't believe. Wow. We started something. And I got to tell you, folks, the reason that I stopped streaming, you saw I put a message. I had one stream where I was just too tired to get through it, right? And the reason that I stopped streaming until now, the reason that I've been silent from before the election to now, is because my body gave out. I was sick to my stomach. I was physically ill, afraid that Kamala Harris might win the election, afraid of what that would mean, not just for me, but for my good friend Tara Reid, who is currently in exile in Russia, for the country, for World War III. But I was also worried about what it might mean for me, because I knew if this book was so much of a problem that it got banned from Amazon, that it was on a list that got it banned from Amazon, that means this guy was on a list also. And they already don't like this guy because he's an RT reporter, because he goes to conferences in Iran and he meets presidents from the Islamic Republic of Iran. I've met 2 of Iran's presidents in person. One I did a TV interview with, the other I had a reception at, and I was quite sick to my stomach, nervous that Kamala Harris would win the election. But at the same time, I kept saying Trump was going to win. And I called it for Trump way ahead of times. Why? Because I watched those podcasts and I saw how Trump was coming across as a human being and Kamala was not. And on top of that, I noticed that the mainstream media got really stupid in the lead up to the election. The mainstream media was getting desperate. And when the mainstream media said Donald Trump had a rally in Madison Square Garden, and do you know who had a rally in Madison Square Garden 80 years ago? The Nazis. When mainstream media said that, I was just like, are you shitting me? Are you shitting me? That's how desperate they're getting. It's like, geez, how many times has the Democratic National Convention been in Madison Square Garden? How many basketball games are there in Madison Square Garden? The Communist Party USA, they had all their conventions in that was their argument, right? Oh my God. And I was at the Madison Square Garden rally of Donald Trump. I wasn't inside. I was outside. All right. Those of you maybe don't recall, I'll show you. I'm not going to show you the whole video, but I'll show you a little bit of the video. I was there at MSG. At MSG at Trump's big rally. Here we go. Oh, hold on. I was there for those who missed it. I was at MSG the 2 Sundays before the election. So there we go. So we're here on 34th Street, and the crowds have lined up. They're going in to see Trump speak. We've got our banner. We're handing out our palm cards, spreading the message.
Like a concert, but bigger. I see the lines of people going block after block after block after block, and it makes you wonder, is the media, the mainstream media, really telling you the truth about how unpopular Donald Trump actually is?
This administration is evil, and we need to bring America back and make America godly again. Make America great again.
Only peace can make America great again. Only peace can make America great again. This was a great, great moment when Trump talked to Kim Jong-un and started the process of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And we want to see peace not just with North Korea, but with Russia, with China, with many countries around the world. It is outrageous that billions of dollars is being spent on prolonging the war in Ukraine when our people can't get relief in North Carolina. People are left behind in Georgia and North Carolina. They can't get the relief they need. This is outrageous. Our government is more concerned with waging wars around the world than for caring for our own people. That we need a president who will put America first, a president who will bring peace around the world. Only peace can make America great again. Yeah, you think Trump could be a peace president?
I think he can, as long as he surrounds himself with people who have peace in mind. My concern, I'm a voter, I'm concerned about everything. He's surrounding himself with a lot of people from big tech, and big tech has pretty much been now part of the military-industrial complex, so that's slightly concerning, but I think if Trump surrounds himself with good people, I think so.
I appreciate Trump and all his efforts.
You like the banner, huh?
I do.
Yeah, are you worried about war, the danger of war?
I am, and I know I'm confident that Trump can put an end to it.
They're marching us toward World War III, and they're taking our freedoms away. While they do it, we have got to stand up. Kamala Harris represents the most vile factions of the deep state, the regime change apparatus. Yeah, what do you think about how Kamala Harris, I mean, it seems like she's locking up her political opponents, trying to put people in jail, trying to put Trump in jail so she can win the election?
They'll do anything to stay in power.
You're a Kennedy fan, I can see, huh?
I am, yes.
Yeah, he's bold, sticking up about the vaccines and all of that. Tell him
he is, but I think it's important. When you have a lot of mainstream publications who refuse to report on a lot of the stories that people have, I think it only adds more validity to what Kennedy's been saying about big pharma, big ag.
This is a man of peace. This is a man that can do it. This is a man that can make things happen. Everybody saying war, war, war. This man is for peace, he's for unity, he's for the black, he's for the white, he's for everybody. This is the man I like. Yeah. Don't worry about what the fake media say. 100% the right man for the job.
We want peace between all different races and nationalities of the world. This is how they are. I'm here advocating peace and he's calling me a Nazi. Didn't the Nazis start a big war? Didn't the Nazis take people's freedom away? This is how they are. This is exactly how they are. You're a Nazi if you want peace. This is how sick they are. You're standing here saying you want peace and he's calling us Nazis for wanting peace. I'm standing here for peace and they call you a Nazi. This is how sick the woke left is. It's Nazism to want peace. I'm a patriot. I love my country, and loving your country means you don't want a war. I am a patriot. I love America, and I don't want World War III. Only peace can make America great again. Trump wants to negotiate. He wants to trade with countries around the world rather than bombing them. He wants to end these insane sanctions that are weakening the dollar around the world. And he wants to open up trade and friendship. Peace starts with trade and doing business.
Obama couldn't do it. Bush couldn't do it. He did it. For that reason, I'm giving my vote for him. I'm from New York City here. I'm voting for him.
About yourself, you and I go back to Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah, go back to Occupy Wall Street. I started off with the Jersey City Peace Movement. We're all about saying no to wars. And that's why I've come out to stand here with this sign, because World War III is a bad thing to get ourselves involved with. And seeing who Kamala Harris these days is surrounding herself with, the likes of Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and these neocon warmongers that just won't leave us alone.
What do you think? Sorry. What do you think? Excellent. Excellent. That was a great moment when he met with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, he has the respect for people around the world, unlike Kamala.
Absolutely.
No one has any respect for her.
I say America first, not Ukraine first. I say America first, not Israel first. Only peace can make America great again. Only peace can make America great again. This is the... No problem.
How are people liking it? Good?
He's a deal maker, and this should just be the beginning. I can't wait until Donald Trump shakes hands with Putin. I can't wait until Donald Trump shakes hands with Xi Jinping. I can't wait until Donald Trump shakes hands with the Iranians and with the Cubans all around the world. Only peace can make America great again. And it's time that we do business. There's a whole new economy in the world. If you look at the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, all these countries are rising up from poverty and building new railways and all that. We should trade with them. We should get some of that money for America. America shouldn't be trying to lock the world out. Our dollar is losing value because of this silly policy.
All right. We did it. We did it. I mean, and the fact that I was there with my good friend, shout out to Phil, who's in the video. Shout out to Red Illuminati, who's in the video. Shout out to all the volunteers who helped us, the folks from Manhattan Family Church. I mean, that was amazing. And that was not an easy day. It was very last minute, but we did that. But that day is now recorded in history. Why? Why, you ask, is this day recorded in history? Because New Yorker magazine was on the scene and they did a story about it. The Trump show comes to Madison Square Garden. And let me add, in their story, they wrote, Kamala Harris is an insane warmonger. An activist named Caleb Maupin said into his bullhorn. Kamala Harris is a product of George Soros and the U.S. regime change apparatus. He was standing in front of a banner that read, "Only peace can make America great again," over a photo of Donald Trump shaking hands with Kim Jong-un. We did it. I mean, we, with exposing the Kamala Harris narrative being way ahead of the game. I mean, we were talking about how they were going to try to get her to be president back in 2020. We wrote this book. And then with the Peace Maga operation, we did something beautiful. We did something absolutely beautiful. And I got to say, I have never, the night of the election, I was out in Oklahoma. Shout out to our friends who hosted me. And I was sick to my stomach. And at 8 o'clock at night, I was tired and I turned my phone off and I took some sleeping pills and I just went to sleep. And then I woke up in the morning, 6 a.m. or so, and the sun had come out and I said, I better just see what happened. And I turned on my phone and I was like, holy shit. Holy crap. We did it. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. I have never been so relieved by an election result in my life. And I got to tell you, this was interesting for me because one of the most definitive elections in my life was an election that Dick Cheney won in 2004. And that was very disheartening to me, demoralizing to me when Dick Cheney got reelected as vice president. And I got to tell you, this election, when Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney lost, epic, beautiful, great moment. Kamala Harris made it abundantly clear that she was the neocon candidate. She was the Ukraine first candidate. She also made it clear that she was married to an Israel lobbyist and that she wouldn't give the Palestinians a bone. She couldn't even pretend to be pro-Palestinian enough, or at least a little bit more pro-Palestinian than Trump. She didn't even pretend. I mean, it was wild. And the media got desperate. And I mean, it got stupid towards the end. Donald Trump came out and he said, "Oh, Liz Cheney's always trying to start a war. She's always trying to start a war. I'd like to see her on the front lines, facing down the barrel of a gun." Mainstream media. Donald Trump calls for executing Liz Cheney. Not what he said. And I got to tell you, they got so nuts. They got so nuts towards the end of the election because they knew they were going to lose, because every poll behind the scenes showed that Donald Trump was going to win. Donald Trump was going to win. And I mean, Donald Trump's victory raises a lot of questions. First of all, why did the Democrat Party get 15 million more votes in 2020 than in 2024? 15 million is not a small number. And the Trump vote was about the same. It was, Trump got more votes this time than last time, but it wasn't that much more. But the Democrats got 15 million less votes in this election than they got in 2020. How did that happen? 15 million. What's going on here? And people say, "Well, Caleb, you can't say the 2020 elections were rigged. You don't have proof." Well, I did stories at the time about the Native Voter Project. That was clearly illegal activity, but you can't invalidate the votes, right? We know that in the state of Nevada in 2020, the Democrats had a project they set up called the Native Voter Project, that if you were of one particular race, if you voted, your name got put in a drawing to win money and gift cards. Now, that's a completely illegal thing to do. You cannot incentivize anyone to vote with prizes. You especially cannot incentivize people of one ethnic group to vote. That's completely illegal. And that was a fraudulent activity that Democrats engaged in Nevada. But you can't then take away every Native American's vote because of that. So it's like you can't change the results, but it was some malfeasance. We also know that there was a news story prior to the 2020 elections about one candidate, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter, that the FBI went around to all of the mainstream media outlets and to Facebook and Twitter and told them they weren't allowed to show it. It's Russian propaganda. Hunter Biden's laptop with all of his foul play and criminal activities in it. And from what we understand, that story was 100% true. And so the FBI was going around, rigging the media to make sure they didn't report a negative story about one of the candidates. But I was the one that said, I'm not convinced the votes were miscounted. That's what I always said. I always said, people talked about mail-in ballots and all that. And I said, no, I'm not convinced. Well, now I'm starting to wonder, because 15 million is not a small number. And how in the world, were the Democrat, what did they do to lose 15 million people? Was it just the inflation? Is it just the economy is so bad? Is it Palestine? Are there 15 million Muslims in America? Like what was it? How did the Democrats get 15 million less votes? How did that happen? And it looks to me like there were a lot of votes that the Democrats got in 2020 that, well, I mean, I think you know what this seems to indicate. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but I am giving a lot more credibility to those who claim that there was some fraud in 2020 than I used to. I used to think, okay, well, the vote counting thing, that's where you lose me. Not no more. Not no more. Not anymore. I mean, 15 million. Give me a break. That is, I mean, were there 15 million people, right? Well, Caleb, it's Bob Avakian and the Revolutionary Communist Party. They endorsed Biden in 2020, and they didn't, right? There must be 15 million revolutionary communists in America. Bob Avakian's followers who voted for Biden in 2020 and didn't vote this time. That's what it is. There must be 15 million RCP members in America. That's what it is. A little bit of a communist inside baseball joke. But regardless, folks, I have never been so relieved by an election result like this. But I've got a couple other things to say. First of all, I am so proud of the Muslim American community. So proud of the Muslim American community because for the longest time, many different minority groups and interest groups in the United States have been trying to form a voting bloc. They've tried to say, hey, if you don't give us what we want, we're not going to vote for you. And they say that to the Democrats, and the Democrats say, oh, well, what are you going to do? Vote for the Republicans? You have to vote for us. Well, in this election, it looks like the Muslim American community said, all right, you're going to bomb Gaza. You're going to kill the Palestinians. You're going to toe the Israeli line and give Israel everything you want. Well, you know what? We're voting for Jill Stein. And we're voting for Trump. Some Muslims voted for Harris, but it was a minority. And with Muslims voting for Jill Stein, and with Muslims voting for Trump, and in states like Minnesota and states like Michigan, it made a pretty big difference. And the Muslim community said, look, we're going to stand with the Palestinians. And they did. And they did. And I am so proud of the Muslim community. That's one thing I wanted to say. Another thing that I think needs to be pointed out, Israel. I mean, Israel hung over this election like you wouldn't believe. It really did. And the Democratic Party and, I mean, look, there's many layers to how the bombing of Gaza has changed the political conversation in the United States. But one aspect of it is that the U.S. government is very much dominated by the Israel lobby, including the Trump camp, including the conservative camp. Don't you think they're not? And the woke current that was unleashed by the American deep state for their own reasons to kind of beat back Trump and beat back the lower levels of capital. If you follow their logic, you have to oppose Israel. You have to support the Palestinians. Now, that doesn't mean that, they're genuine anti-imperialists. They certainly wouldn't support the Palestinians if they were winning, if they weren't the oppressed victims that they are. I mean, they're being murdered, right? But if the Palestinians were, if they had won and established a strong anti-imperialist country, then of course the woke people would all hate them because the New York Times would accuse them of violating human rights. But because the Palestinians are brown people that are being murdered by a country of white settlers, the woke people, unless they have their brains on backwards, in order to follow their logic, they have to support the Palestinians. And because the Democrats fomented Black Lives Matter, because they poured so much money into the campus woke radical stuff, there was a huge upsurge for Palestine. I mean, there was no way the Democrats could avoid it. And they tried. They've tried to say, oh, Israel's the gay rights paradise. You got to support Israel. Oh, the Jewish students are oppressed. They see a Palestine flag and it's almost like they're being threatened with violence. They tried that. And they did cancel culture against students who criticized Israel. They tried to make Israel a woke cause, but no, they couldn't do that. And on top of that, courting Muslims around the world as allies of American imperialism, against Gaddafi, against Bashar Assad, against Iran, etc., is an important thing too. And Barack Obama and the Hillary Clinton State Department really courted the support of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood current among Muslims, and you got Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And with the Democrats pouring all this money into their base with this intersectionality, woke oppression theory politics, they poured all this money into their base. And their base, it's like, all right, guys, here's more money for gender studies. Here's more money for race, gender theory, and critical theory, and read some Franz Fanon and they, as long as you're not talking about Marxist economics, as long as the bulk of the working class are the enemy, as long as it's about oppression and who's the most oppressed and oppressed Olympics and white people are the evil racist, as long as it's this woke stuff, they pumped all of that, and all this money was pumped into that. And they're like, all right, this is going to fight Trump. And then all that money, all the foundation money and all the lectures and all the privilege walk, brainwashing and all the guilt and all the performative wokeism and I'm a good white person and all of that backfired. They were supposed to fight Donald Trump. And enough of that woke apparatus that they created, enough of the woke counter gang that they created, misfired at Israel. Whoops. Oopsie daisy. The imperialists fomented wokeism to target Donald Trump, and a big chunk of wokeism ended up going against Israel. Well, I'm okay with that. I'm not opposed. I'm opposed to Israel and what it's doing to the Palestinians. And I agreed with the message of the pro-Palestine protests, but it royally fucked the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party was relying on these woke mobs they had fomented. And suddenly the woke mobs were saying something that the Democratic Party and the U.S. foreign policy apparatus could not let them say. When Black Lives Matter was marching to remove Donald Trump during the 2020 summer Black Lives Matter string, Mitt Romney was walking down the street with Black Lives Matter. There was Mitt Romney, the Republican. He was at the Black Lives Matter rally. But when the woke people, the very same woke college professors getting paid by the same woke foundations were saying free, free Palestine, Mitt Romney definitely wasn't marching with them. And neither was Kamala Harris. And even Rashida Tlaib and even some of the most anti-Israel members of Congress, even AOC had to back away from them and all of this. And all of a sudden, there was this huge gap between the Democrat Party and the fanatical, woke, oppression theory, non-economic, pseudo-Marxist crap that they had fomented. It didn't line up. It did not line up. All of a sudden, all the oppression theory and all of that they had fomented, they suddenly had to distance themselves from their own followers. And the Muslim community did the right thing and stood with the Palestinians and endorsed Jill Stein. Council of American Islamic Relations, that's a Muslim Brotherhood outfit, westernized Muslims, Sunni westernized Muslims. They're the people behind Rashida Tlaib. They endorsed Jill Stein. It was amazing. I have never seen anything like this. And the Muslim community stuck to their guns. And they said, if you can't criticize Israel, if you can't oppose Israel, you're not getting our votes. And don't tell us how bad Donald Trump is. And then Donald Trump was smart. Donald Trump was smart. Donald Trump embraced the Muslims who were willing to support him. And that was brave. That was bravery on Donald Trump's part. Donald Trump, there's a lot of people who vote for Trump because they hate Muslims, right? I mean, you heard the speech that was given by former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, a disgusting speech he gave at Madison Square Garden. I loved most of those Madison Square Garden speeches. Dr. Phil was great. Tulsi was great. RFK was great. I'll even say that some of what Elon Musk said was great. But that speech that Rudy gave at Madison Square Garden, that was a vile, hateful speech. And Donald Trump risked losing support. And he has a lot of rich Zionists who are giving him money. But when the mayor of Hamtramck, a Muslim, a vehemently anti-Israel Muslim, decided to endorse Donald Trump welcomed him on the stage and hugged him. And he took the support of a Muslim, of Muslims. Donald Trump, you want to tell me that Donald Trump is Islamophobic and Donald Trump is a bigot? Donald Trump brought Muslims onto the stage and accepted their support. That's huge. That's amazing, right? I mean, a lot of things that Donald Trump has said about Israel, I certainly don't agree with, and his position on Israel is not good. But the fact that he embraced Muslim support, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And it may have been risky with the donors. The donors probably didn't like it, but the American people saw it. They saw it and they said, whoa, they told us Donald Trump was a bigot. They told us Donald Trump was a racist. They told us that Donald Trump, wants to kill all the brown people and all of that. And he's got Muslims on the stage with him. What's going on here? The Democrats lost control of the wokeness that they had fomented, and it turned into a pro-Palestine movement that they weren't allowed to embrace. And so woke momentum lost. Meanwhile, Donald Trump embraced the minority of Muslims that were supporting him and thought he was better than Kamala Harris. John McCarthy is pointing out what is true, that they did not allow any Muslims or Palestinians on the stage at the Democrat National Convention. And I mean, this was a crazy election. This was a wild, wild election. Folks, I would not be as happy about this election result. I really wouldn't be if it wasn't for the fact that RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbert were on the stage with Donald Trump. In the final months of his campaign, he made them central players. And the way Tulsi Gabbert has talked about Syria, meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, visiting Syria at the request of the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, the way RFK brags about the fact that there was a KGB agent who came over to his house to negotiate peace and de-escalate and arrange détente during the Cold War. And RFK says it was a heroic thing that his uncle and his father did to sit down with the KGB to negotiate to prevent nuclear war, and how RFK tells the truth about the Ukraine war and where it came from. And look, again, those people are not good on the Israel-Palestine question. We'll get to that. But the fact that they, who have said bold, amazing things on Russia, Tulsi Gabbert, who talked about the biolabs, RFK, who also talked about the biolabs in Ukraine, the fact that they were given center stage, they were at every rally, they were up on the stage speaking with Trump, that I mean, this is amazing. And folks, I got to tell you, I am ecstatic. I am absolutely ecstatic about the fact that Tulsi Gabbert, who apparently I'm a big influence on, according to the Epoch Times, according to Trevor Loudon. Let's play that clip once again, just because it's fun. Tulsi Gabbert could soon be the director of national intelligence for the U.S. government. She would be the CIA's boss. Can you believe this? Right? I mean, she could be in charge of the FBI and the CIA and naval intelligence, and 18 different intelligence agencies would all be under the supervision of a person about whom this was said.
Really there to promote Russian and North Korean foreign policies. She may not understand that, but she's being used by people like Dennis Kucinich and others to do that. She also has some connections to the Center for Political Innovation, which is a very pro-Russian outfit run by a man called Caleb Maupin.
Yes, say it loud, folks. And that is the woman that Donald Trump has picked to be the director of national intelligence. And the person that Donald Trump has selected to be the attorney general, Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz, I mean, obviously there's not as much of an overlap between Matt Gaetz and the Center for Political Innovation and in terms of how we see things. But Matt Gaetz is a good friend of Tara Reade. Tara Reade, our friend who has spoken at CPI conferences. You know that. Tara Reade, the woman who accused Joe Biden of sexual assault and had to flee the country to Russia. The reason she fled the country is because Matt Gaetz, her friend, told her to flee the country, tipped her off that her life was in danger. Matt Gaetz. And Matt Gaetz is the guy that Donald Trump has picked to be the attorney general. Now, I am telling you, folks, I don't want to lead you into a false sense of security, right? This is all good right now. Tulsi Gabbert running the intelligence agencies, Matt Gaetz running the Department of Justice. This is all great. But it's going to be an uphill battle. It's going to be an uphill battle. But what I'm trying to tell you now is not that it's going to be all hugs and rainbows from here forward. What I'm telling you is there's a fight coming. And our organization, the people who watch these live streams, the people who have joined our community and helped us carry out very important operations, you now have the opportunity to matter in this fight. You have the opportunity to make a difference in history like never before. And that's why we are going to the inauguration. January 20th, I am going to be in Washington, D.C. with as many people as I can muster. And we are taking the Peace Maga operation to Washington, D.C. on January 20th. We are headed to D.C. for the inauguration. That huge Peace Maga banner, that is going to be at the National Mall. You better believe it. That is going to be at the National Mall on January 20th. We wouldn't miss it for the world. And there's a lot of really exciting things in the works. CPI, we have a really exciting plan for the next 90 days. I'm not going to go into huge detail about it. I want things to be kind of a surprise. I mean, people in CPI already know what we're doing, and they're helping do it. And I'm blown away by how much people have stepped up to the plate. And look, it's going to be a challenge, right? You know, I love Tulsi Gabbert, and I love a lot of the work she does, but I think she's dead wrong about Israel. I'll just be honest. And I'm not gonna condemn her and call her out for it. But I'm also, I mean, I'm not going to I will say it, and I will point out to her that she's wrong. And I'm not going to cut ties and denounce and disavow. I don't do that. Right. I want to influence her, but I'm not going to give up support for the Palestinians and support what Israel is doing. Right. So it's complicated, right? You have to have a little bit of nuance. But I will say this. Okay. Well, first of all, I saw somebody super chatted me about Marco Rubio. Right. And that's not confirmed. Trump hasn't said that. You know, Marco Rubio would be an awful Secretary of State. Horrible. But Donald Trump has not confirmed him yet. That's a rumor that's going around from the New York Times, according to someone familiar with the matter, but it hasn't happened yet. And even if it does happen, that's awful. Marco Rubio is not good on foreign policy. He's not good in a lot of ways, but, you know, it's not confirmed yet. And that doesn't mean that Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbert, they've already been named, folks, and they are much closer to where we're at. Let me also add that two individuals that are absolutely horrible neoconservatives, horrible Zionists, and were key in pushing Donald Trump to do the worst thing that he did as president, murder Qasem Soleimani, the hero of the Islamic Revolution. Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo, out. out. Donald Trump said they will have no role in his administration. No Mike Pompeo and no Nikki Haley. And John Bolton is already, he's not even being considered. The two people who got Donald Trump to try coups against Venezuela, to murder Qasem Soleimani and bring us to the brink of war with Iran, Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, out. And the shitty, horrible United Nations ambassador Nikki Haley, I am Nikki Haley. I am reading a letter about how evil Russia is and why we must always support Israel. Nikki Haley, out of here. Out of here. I have never been so optimistic about the fact that, I mean, look, they are going to fight. Trump is pushing it pedal to the metal. And that means people like us are going to be really important to Donald Trump. I wrote an article before this election where I said that there are three possible outcomes for this election. Outcome number one, the worst one, is Kamala Harris winning. Well, that didn't happen. Outcome number two is that Donald Trump wins and the establishment amps up the worst aspects of Trumpism, the pro-Israel stuff, the anti-immigrant stuff, the, anti-China stuff. And then I said there was a third option. And that third option was Donald Trump winning, but doing so in a way that puts him at odds with the majority of his own class and at odds with the American foreign policy establishment. And it's too soon to tell. We don't know. But at this point, it is starting to look like option number three. It is starting to look like the third scenario, which I said is the best case scenario, because if Donald Trump starts battling his own class, just like Roosevelt did, just like Lincoln did, he is going to need people like us to have his back. That's his only hope, right? If the majority of the rich and powerful are against you, the only people who can have your back are the American people. And that's going to mean we are going to be really, really important to Donald Trump. We are going to have to be there out in the streets defending him when he does good things. And we'll criticize him when he does things we don't agree with. That's fine. We're not beholden. We're not puppets of Trump. But they're not going to fight him for doing bad things. They're going to fight him for doing good things. And so we have got to be the energy in the street backing up Donald Trump when he tries to make peace. We have got to build the Peace Maga energy. We have got to build the Peace Maga energy to take this next 4 years to build the anti-imperialist bloc in America. And folks, I just want to show you, look, everyone forgets about this. I haven't forgotten about this. And we are going to be reminding Donald Trump of this very soon. But Donald Trump gave an amazing speech, a very amazing speech after leaving office. And I'm going to put that speech on. It's a very short speech. This is the Quantum Leap speech.
Past generations of Americans pursued big dreams and daring projects that once seemed absolutely impossible. They pushed across an unsettled continent and built new cities in the wild frontier. They transformed American life with the interstate highway.
Now, listen to that phrase, built cities. Built cities. Where have I heard that before?
System, magnificent it was. And they launched a vast network of satellites into orbit all around the Earth. But today, our country has lost its boldness. Under my leadership, we will get it back in a very big way. If you look at just 3 years ago, what we were doing was unthinkable. How good it was, how great it was for our country. Our objective will be a quantum leap in the American standard of living. That's what will happen. Here are just a few of the ways we can do it. Almost 1/3 of the landmass of the United States is owned by the federal government, with just a very, very small portion of that land, just a fraction, 1/2 of 1%. Would you believe that? We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. In other words, we'll actually build new cities in our...
Build New cities. Now, where have I heard that before? City building, building cities, cities building. I mean, did somebody write a book? Was there like an organization that talked about being city builders? Was that a thing that somebody talked about? Someone remind me. Did anyone ever talk about building cities before?
Again, these freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination, and give hundreds of thousands of young people and other people, all hardworking families, a new shot at home ownership and, in fact, the American dream. Another big opportunity is in transportation. Dozens of major companies in the United States and China are racing to develop vertical takeoff and landing vehicles for families and individuals. Just as the United States led the automotive revolution in the last century, I want to ensure that America, not China, leads this revolution in air mobility. These breakthroughs can transform commerce, bring a giant infusion of wealth into rural America, and connect families in our country in new ways. Likewise, through our Strategic National Manufacturing Initiative, which is going to be very big and very, very successful, we will turn forgotten communities into hives of industry, producing the goods we will no longer import from China. We will also have a major initiative on lowering the cost of living with a special focus on lowering the cost of a new car and lowering the cost to build a single-family home. And they will be beautiful homes. And I will ask Congress to support baby bonuses for young parents to help launch a new baby boom.
Do you hear that? He wants to increase the population. Kamala Harris and the World Economic Forum and all the billionaire monopolies are saying, oh, we got to drive down the population to save the planet. Donald Trump is talking about increasing the population.
Finally, I'll challenge the governors of all 50 states to join me in a great modernization and beautification campaign, getting rid of ugly buildings, refurbishing our parks and our public spaces, making cities and towns more livable, ensuring a pristine environment, and building towering monuments to our true American heroes. Very importantly, I will also make sure all of these new places are safe. We love and cherish our police. They will do the job the way they have to. It is time to start talking about greatness for our country again. I will dramatically increase living standards and build a future that brings our country together through excitement, opportunity, and success. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was an amazing speech Donald Trump gave. And if Donald Trump actually starts to implement that, that would be amazing. That would be absolutely amazing. That would be absolutely amazing. I will say, folks, I am not a fan of Miriam Adelson, and I am not a fan of J.D. Vance. I do not trust J.D. Vance. I really don't. I must say I'm also, I will say this. Donald Trump says at this point he is dismantling and abolishing the U.S. Department of Education. Now, that's a big one. That's a big one, and I honestly don't know what the implications of that will be. I really don't. That's something that conservatives have talked about doing for a long time, but never done. And, there is federal funding of education, but most education funding comes from local communities. Some of it comes from the states, but there is federal funding of education. And he's not saying he's going to cut off the federal funding. I mean, even private schools get some federal funding. He's not saying that. He's saying he's going to dismantle the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Department of Education. Now, I think this is related to the fact that the teachers' unions are a big base of support for the Democrat Party. The teachers' unions, they rely on the support of the Democrat Party, and they on top of that, they very much, rely on the Democrats to, facilitate them and all of that. And I think that it's related to that. It's also a big conservative thing. But in America at this point, I mean, most education is done on a local level. I'm from Ohio, and Ohio has very shitty schools. Jonathan Kazal, the leading educational scholar in the United States, who is a communist. I mean, a sympathizer with Cuba, wrote a great book called Children of the Revolution, which is about the Cuban educational system, a very good book. Jonathan Cazal wrote a book called Shame of the Nation, and it was about the Ohio educational system and how in Ohio, how good of an education you get depends on where you live. And, you know, I grew up in a really small town, and, you know, I got a shitty education. I mean, no disrespect to any of the great people in my town, great educators who wanted to do their best, but I got a pretty shitty education. You know, whereas, you know, if I lived in Shaker Heights or, you know, Beechwood or Lakewood, I probably would have gotten a much better education, right? That's just how these things go. You know, you lived in Hudson, Ohio, or, you know, whatever, you might have gotten a much better education, but, you know, and the U.S., the Ohio State Supreme Court went as far as declaring that the U.S., you know, that the Ohio educational system was unconstitutional because it was so unequal. So, I mean, I think personally that, you know, the problem of education in America would probably best be resolved by more government involvement to some degree or other. But it looks like the Department of Education is being dismantled. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like Donald Trump, I mean, again, a lot of his supporters are advocates of free market neoliberalism. I mean, no question about it. So we're just going to have to see, right? You know, we're just going to have to see. So, you know, I'm not thinking that dismantling the Department of Education is necessarily a good move. I'm not thinking, you know, man, just stop funding schools with property taxes. That sounds about right. Right. I'm not thinking that, you know, that Miriam Adelson is good. I'm not trusting JD Vance. But I think the point that I'm making, folks, is that with Trump in office, we have the ability to make a difference. That's the point. Because Trump will be at odds with the majority of his own class, which is what it's looking like. If he's putting Matt Gaetz in charge of the Department of Justice, he's putting Tulsi Gabbert, who they called a foreign agent, who they put on the Quiet Skies terrorism watch list. Tulsi Gabbert, who sued Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton said she worked for the Russians. Tulsi Gabbert running the intelligence agencies. Wow. Let's see what happens. Right? I mean, I got a lot of questions. First of all, I wonder what changes in American discourse when Tulsi takes over intelligence. Because the way intelligence works is it's not upfront, right? It's not like, oh, yes, we're giving money to this person. It's all covert. And I've got a feeling that a lot of stuff on social media that looks completely organic is intelligence directed. I've got a feeling that a lot of stuff that we hear in media and a lot of the way things are discussed is intelligence connected. And if Tulsi, who's got a much more sane and not World War III oriented perspective, is suddenly in charge of the intelligence apparatus, watch what changes in America. You know, let's see. I mean, I don't know what's going to change, but it's very, very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of great potential, but if there was ever a time to get involved, folks, if there was ever a time to get involved, it's now. Right? If you want to change the world, now is the time to change the world. We have a president who is taking office at odds with his own class. We have got critics of U.S. foreign policy like Tulsi Gabbert and RFK picking out the new administration. We have got a man in office who says he's going to make peace with Russia, and he's going to put America first. I mean, look, I'm not saying that everything is necessarily going to immediately get better. I'm saying that we have the ability to get into the fight now more than ever. It's time for us to get into the ring, right? Most of the time, all we get to do in American politics, it's like a boxing match, and we're not in the ring. We're standing outside and we're cheering for the guy we like, and we're hoping that our shouting will give the guy we like more excitement so he can punch harder. But now we're entering a period where they're letting us get a little close to the ring. Now, they're not giving us boxing gloves. We're not boxing in the ring, but we're close. We're in the corner. We're getting close to the action, folks. This gives us an opportunity. Those of us who are anti-imperialists, those of us who are revolutionaries, I mean, those of us who want to see a whole new America where working families come first and this global imperialist system that is impoverishing people all over the planet is defeated, we have an opportunity, and we should not let it pass. It is time to swing into action. It is time to get shit done. It is time to step up to the plate. Boom. We need you in the Center for Political Innovation, right? Membership is open. You're welcome to join. Go to the website and become a member. And look, I've been on for an hour so far, and I see there's a lot of Rumble rants that have come in. I have never seen so many Rumble rants come in. So it's going to be a long Q&A. So I should probably shut up pretty soon. But Penny had a lot to say, but so did Leo and so did Hempcar. A lot of people had a lot of Rumble rants, and we've also got 5 or 6 super chats to answer. So people have got a lot that they want me to talk about. So I should probably shut down. We should probably do the roll call here and I answer things, but I do want to just say this, right? I'm not going to touch on this too much, but, I am not a communist anymore. I am an innovationist, but my views have not changed, right? My views have been very consistent. This is live stream number what? This is like 700 and what number is this? This is live stream number what? This is live stream number 700, whatever. From live stream number 1, I have believed in God. That has not changed. From live stream number 1, I have been anti-imperialist. That has not changed. From live stream number 1, I have been a defender of the legacy of countries that have broken out of imperialism and built a rationally organized economy with 5-year plans and defended the history of the Soviet Union and China against the smears. That has not changed. I haven't changed. My views have not changed. But I have come to the understanding that at this point, what it means to be a communist has nothing to do with what I believe. For me, being a communist always meant that you opposed imperialism and you stood with the people that imperialism attacks. Communists do not do that in America. They don't, right? They don't stand with Russia. They don't stand with China. They don't stand with North Korea. They don't stand with Iran. They don't stand with Cuba. You can count on your hand the communist groups in America that are sympathetic to any of those countries. Number one. So, and number two, doesn't mean you just stand with people around the world that are attacked by the imperialists. It means you stand with people in this country that are attacked by the imperialists. And those people are the Uhuru movement, the People's Democratic Uhuru movement. And I have stood with them from day one. I have always stood with them. When the U.S. government raided their homes and called them Russian agents, immediately we stood with them. And even the communist groups I can count on my hand that defend countries around the world, they don't defend them. They don't defend them, and they've even attacked us for defending them, right? So that's the first thing. I've always been anti-imperialist and always stood with those the imperialists attacked. Communists do not do that. So why be a communist? Two, communism for me has always been about rationally organizing the economy so that we can have economic growth. The idea is that with a rationally planned economy, that's the first stage called socialism, where you have 5-year plans and the government plans out the economy so that growth is unleashed and you don't have the irrationality of the market. That eventually leads to a world of so much wealth and so much abundance that you can have a world where you don't need a government, where people can just live, because there's so much wealth that people can live without coercion, and that people are pretty much equal because everyone has enough. Now, that's what communism's always meant to me, and you can read the Marx quotes and all of that. That's not what it means to these people. What communism means to American communists is abolish billionaires. It means some people have more money than others, and that's no fair, and no one should ever have $1 billion. Everyone should be this poor, and that's not what I don't believe that. That's not what they believe in China. It's not, I don't believe that anymore. And for the longest time on these live streams, I have stood there and said, no, I'm the real communist. I'm the real communist because I stand with the victims of imperialism. I'm the real communist because I want economic growth and a planned economy to create economic growth. I'm the real communist because I say it's not about redistribution of income. It's about rational planning of the means of production. I've sat there and said, I'm the real communist. I'm the real communist. I'm done doing that. I'm done doing that. I'm just, there's no point. There is no point. Communism is a brand. It is an aesthetic, right? It's the red flag. It's the hammer and sickle. It's the guillotine. It's the, the Russian, hat, the Yushchenko or whatever. And that's not me. And I do disagree with certain aspects of Marxism, Leninism. I am not a dialectical materialist. I believe in God, and I would not be here without God. Thank God for God. If it wasn't for my spirituality and it wasn't for my relationship with a higher power, I would have given up a long time ago because I've been subjected to a lot. Not going to get into it tonight. So, I would have given up. So, Marxism, Leninism, classic communism is based on this ideology called dialectical materialism. Well, materialism means there's no God. Well, there is a God, folks. There's a God. Materialism means that matter is all that exists, and that thought is inseparable from matter that thinks. That's what Engels said. And that there is no power of intention. There is no power of human will, right? It's just, matter is all that exists. There's no spiritual forces. I don't agree with that. I don't. I do believe in the power of human will. I do believe in the power of optimism and intention, and I do believe in God. So I'm not a materialist, and I'm not dialectical, right? I don't think that conflict is what we should be promoting at this time. Now, sometimes you have to fight, right? Sometimes you need a confrontation, right? So I'm not saying confrontation is always wrong. Confrontation is often very, very good, but it's not the only answer. And the dialectical philosophy says the way history moves forward is always through confrontation. Fight, confrontation, struggle. And I'm at the point where I look at our society around us and I say, we are way too dialectical, right? Oh, you don't agree with me? Well, I got to cut you off. Oh, you didn't do something I like? Well, fuck you. I got to cut you off. Oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. Social media is more dialectical than anything I've ever seen. Fight with everybody, battle it out, and it's atomizing and hurting people. I want to create unity. That's what I want to do. I want to bring about reconciliation and forgiveness. And so I'm not a dialectical materialist. And the foundation of Marxism, Leninism is dialectical materialism. I don't agree with it. I do believe we need a rationally organized economy. And I think the state should control the economy. And we need leaders, government leaders that organize the economy so that growth is unlimited. I do think that imperialism, the monopolistic capitalism that dominates the world, is the greatest evil in the world. And we need to unify all the forces around the world to resist imperialism. That I believe. I do believe that the countries that have broken free from imperialism and created this new economy, the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, the Bolivarian alternative of Latin America, the axis of resistance in the Middle East, that they are the future. I agree, because they have broken out of imperialism and they've rationally organized their economy. I do believe that if we continue to rationally organize the means of production, we can build a world with so much wealth that inequality and the state itself will break down. I do believe that. So am I a communist? At this point, I don't want to say I'm a communist anymore because I feel that we have taken it to a new stage. Communism as a movement was intended to be the movement of the labor unions, right? That's basically what Marx was saying. Marx was not the first socialist. There were a lot of socialists at the time, but Marx said, well, I'm a scientific socialist. And he said what made sense at the time, which is that the way we're going to get socialism, the way we're going to overcome the irrationality of the market is the labor unions, the industrial factory workers, are going to rise up and seize control of the means of production. And we're going to build a movement of factory workers. That's what Marx said. And they built that movement of factory workers. And Marxism gave birth to social democracy, or the Labor Party in Britain and all of that. But then imperialism emerged and the labor movement split between the pro-imperialist social democrats and Lenin developed his theory of imperialism, and the anti-imperialist labor unions, they were the communists. And social democracy was the pro-imperialist labor movement. Communism was the anti-imperialist labor movement. Well, we live in a time where labor unions are not the biggest factor, right? I'm just telling you right now, labor unions are not the main way people organize themselves. And the reason that Javier Milei, who I certainly am not a big fan of, the reason that he got elected in Argentina is because many of the young men in Argentina who are part of the gig economy, the labor movement doesn't speak to them. It doesn't speak to them. You know, they're treated in Argentine law like small business owners. They're Uber drivers. They're turning over products on Amazon. They're trying to survive. And the laws are written by a government bureaucracy made up of labor unions and Peronists and Social Democrats, and they're fucked over by it. And in their minds, they think they are small business owners, and they have swallowed this libertarian economic philosophy because the law treats them as capitalists and is written in a way that is supposed to be for the labor unions and for the workers. And so they resent it. And this is the reality of, in this stage of capitalism with the high-tech revolution, where, very little human labor power is used in the process of production. I mean, they've got, computers can just churn out products. There's very little room for human beings in the process of production. The idea that we need to form a labor movement, a movement of factory workers who assemble together and seize their factory from the capital, that's not the way things are organized. The problems of capitalism are still there. The tendency of the falling rate of profit, the problem of overproduction or the value crisis, all of that is still very valid. But the idea that the solution is to form a labor union, which in some instances, I think Amazon should definitely form a labor union, but the idea that we're gonna form a labor union of people who work in the factory, and they're gonna this is not the way we organize in our time, right? We need to figure out a model where gig economy workers, Uber drivers, people who turn over products on Amazon, people who design software, etc., can be, find community and solidarity in struggle. And we need to develop a new model, and that's what I was in Oklahoma doing. And shout out to Peter Coffin, shout out to the other two folks who were there with me. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about what are we doing in our time. Communism as a movement, it pointed to a lot of truth about capitalism, and Leninism in particular. Lenin understood what capitalism had developed into, imperialism, and it pointed to the need for a rationally organized economy, but it advocated building a labor union adjacent movement, right? The social democracy was to be a political party that was adjacent to the labor unions. Communism was the anti-imperialist labor unions. We're not building labor unions at this time. I'm not opposed to it. If you're in a labor union, great. I support labor unions. I think labor unions are a good thing, but that's not the kind of movement I'm building. I'm building a movement of people that are saying imperialism is crashing all around us. And as a result of that, we need to come together and care for each other and learn to build a community of anti-imperialist resistance and solidarity. And in order to do that, we need to innovate. I am an innovationist. Why? Because I believe in human creative power. Human creative power. I believe that there is something amazing about humanity. We are not just another animal. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. And beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way for thousands of years. And bees have been making their beehives the same way for thousands of years. But in just 7,000 or 8,000 years, we've gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel, to iPhones, to high-speed railway, to the internet, to 3D printers, to artificial intelligence. There's something amazing about humanity. No other species rapidly increases its population, expands its life expectancy, expands the level of comfort in life the way we do. The human species has godlike creative power. power. All other species merely interact with their environment, but mankind forces the environment to serve him. This is Engels, Frederick Engels, and that is what defines humanity. And every so often, our creative abilities outstrip the economic model that we live in. Hunter-gatherer civilization, we got too good at it. Feudalism, farming, we got too good at it. Industrial capitalism, we got too good at it. And now we need to adjust and develop a more rationally organized economy so that we can continue to unleash human creative power to even greater heights. I believe in economic growth. I believe in the power of the human will. I believe that imperialism will be defeated. I believe Marxism-Leninism was one stage in the struggle to defeat imperialism. But right now, to be a communist in America puts you on the wrong side. Puts you on the wrong side. And on top of that, communism in America, it's been the devil for a long time. It's been the enemy, and it's been an epithet. And it attracts a certain deviant type of person, which I'll admit I certainly was when I was a teenager. I certainly was in my early 20s, but thank goodness I got my shit together and I've become much more rational. And we need to work with people who aren't motivated by anger and vengeance and a desire to tear things down. We need to work with people who are motivated by love for their community, love for their country, a desire to help and lift up other people, empathy, compassion, solidarity. And the kind of people that are attracted to communism are not those kind of people. I mean, they can get better. I got better. But right now, communism attracts people who feel deviant and who feel at odds with society, who have a lust for vengeance, and it's not a good thing. We've got to take this to a new stage, right? And that said, there among communists in America, I will say this, the overwhelming majority are anti-Russia, overwhelming majority are anti-China, overwhelming majority don't believe in economic growth. There is a very, very small minority of people, a very, very small minority of people who have views that are somewhat close to my own. We're talking 300 people, maybe 500 at the most. I have no desire to be the king of that group. I really don't. I have no desire to be the big boss of I don't know, what do you want to call it? Maga communism, but now they're not. They hate Maga now. So I don't know what they are. There is a very, 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 very small group of people who identify with communism and are on the same side of degrowth and anti-imperialism that I'm on. I have no desire to be the big boss of them, right? I have really no desire to do that. And those people, they have decided to make themselves irrelevant over the course of the next 4 years, right? I'm just telling you, they made the decision, right? Almost as soon as Trump won the election, they decided that they were going to go, oh, Trump is no good. Trump is a Zionist. Trump is horrible. And they decided to render themselves irrelevant. Right now, the American people voted for Trump because they're struggling and they're suffering. And Donald Trump is taking office at odds with the deep state and at odds with the bulk of his own class. And he appointed Tulsi Gabbert to run national intelligence. And he appointed Matt Gaetz to run the Department of Justice. And he gave Mike Pompeo the boot and Nikki Haley the boot. And he's going to dismantle the Department of Education. And Donald Trump is going in there with a popular mandate to fight the rich and powerful. And the communists, the small minority of communists whose heads aren't completely up their asses about all of these issues, the small minority of communists who at least support Russia or at least support Iran, they immediately, just as soon as Trump won, decided they were just going to join the woke mobs against him. Good riddance. Let them. And that's fine. They can do that. I think that's a great thing for them to do. That is a great thing for them to do. Good luck. And on top of that, I'm not building a fandom. I'm building a real community. And that's why I care about the Uhuru movement. I look at what Chairman O'Malley and the Uhuru movement have done for the Black community. And ideologically, we don't see things eye to eye, but I think they're a great model to study. They built 2 beautiful facilities, the Uhuru House in St. Louis, the Uhuru House in Florida. I'm headed down there for their sentencing, December 15th. I'll be in Tampa, Florida. And I realize how dangerous it is that Biden's Department of Justice has prosecuted them. I realize how dangerous that is. And that's why I'm very happy that Matt Gaetz might be the new Attorney General, because I know that he's a friend of Tara Reade, and I know how much Tara Reade cares about the Uhuru case, how we gave her an award and she dedicated it to the Uhuru case. So if she's friends with Matt Gaetz, and Matt Gaetz is a friend of Tucker Carlson, who supports Chairman O'Malley, that means that good things might happen. But regardless, right, I realize how dangerous it is. They're trying to criminalize being an anti-imperialist. That's why I was in the courtroom for jury selection. That's why I went down to Florida for the opening of the trial. That's why our group has done everything we can to raise that case. And these so-called other communists don't give a shit about the Uhuru movement, right? This is a Black nationalist communist group, African internationalist communist group. And these other communists that share that share some of our views, but are holding on to communism and trying to own the word communism, they don't give a shit about the Uhuru movement. They even attacked us for defending it. They said supporting the Uhuru movement was just being a leftist, just being in the protest cage, right? So if they don't give a shit about the Uhuru movement, I mean, who cares about them? Seriously, right? Who cares about them? And I am done with communists. I really am. I am really done with communists. I am really, really done with communists, right? And look, I mean, I'm going to quote Marx and Lenin on these streams, and we're going to talk about capitalism. We're going to talk about economics and all of that. I'm not abandoning my beliefs. My beliefs haven't changed, but I gain nothing from walking around and trying to tell people that this is communism when the overwhelming majority of Americans are opposed to communism because they think it's something completely different. And the overwhelming majority of communists are opposed to me because they believe in something completely different. I mean, the anti-communists don't think what I believe is communism, and the communists of America don't think what I believe is communism. So what do I gain by walking around and yelling at both of them? No, communism is what I say it is. I gain nothing. I gain nothing from doing that. So we're moving on from that. And we've got a very exciting plan of action for the next 90 days. Check out the new website. Totally amazing. And something pretty good is happening probably tomorrow. Don't want to say too much about it. Some great plans are in the works. And after that, it just gets better. And like I said, all leading to we're heading to the inauguration. We are going to be there in big numbers, and we're planning some exciting stuff for the inauguration. Good things. And the American people rose up in their millions to reject the low-wage police state, to reject the march toward World War III. And within our political system, the person who gave voice to that was Donald Trump. And if we are going to be in the fight, we need to be in the Trump camp. Doesn't mean we don't criticize Trump about Israel. Doesn't mean that we don't, challenge Trump. But if and when Donald Trump fights against the forces of darkness and empire, we have to have his back. No question about it. When Donald Trump tries to end the war in Ukraine, we have got to be in the streets backing him up on it. When Donald Trump tries to stand up to the tech monopolies, we've got to have his back. When Donald Trump does good things, we've got to have his back. And we have got to bring with us our understanding of imperialism and how the world works. And we've got to give ideological guidance. We've got to build a real movement, a real network of people that can get real shit done. We have to build the anti-imperialist bloc within U.S. society. And the only way to do that is we've got to be with Trump at this point. Doesn't mean that we have to be blind apologists. Doesn't mean we can't challenge him on Israel or on other issues that he's wrong about. But there's a big divide in U.S. society right now. The overwhelming majority of the American people don't like inflation, don't like cancel culture, don't like degrowth, don't like the march toward World War III, don't like censorship, and they are putting their hopes in Donald Trump. And we got to be with them. That simple. It's like the Communist Party was with Roosevelt. Like the Marxists of America were with Abraham Lincoln. We, as an anti-imperialist movement, we have got to be in the Trump camp. Doesn't mean we're blind apologists. Doesn't mean that we're not. I'm repeating myself, but you know what I'm saying. We got to be with Trump. This next 4 years are going to be exciting. Absolutely. And it's an opportunity. And if you sincerely believe in anti-imperialism and you sincerely love American working families, now's the time to get involved. Join the Center for Political Innovation. Membership is open. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? All right. We got Glenn in Benson, North Carolina. Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Bob in Troy, New York. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Connor in Colorado. Abel from Wisconsin. Ian Chester in England. John McCarthy in Chicago. Matt in Titusville, Florida. Mr. Wonderful in Quanos. Alex in Brazil. Ryan in Kansas City. Dahe in Seattle. Jacob in Wisconsin. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Timoshenko in St. Louis. Owen, the dictatorship of Canada. Jenny in Cincinnati. Liam in Auckland, New Zealand. Patrick in Maine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Rory in Wisconsin. Gus Wynn in Four Oaks. Lori out in Oklahoma. Welcome. St. David, Bermuda, UK. Anway in India. Patch in Arizona. Morgan in Philadelphia. Dan in Los Angeles. Innovationist in the LA area. Yes, he's organizing a meetup. If you're in the LA area, get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with Dan. We're having a California, Los Angeles meetup. Courtney in Northern Virginia. Balthazar in Oakland. Very, very good. Caleb always mispronounces Quanos. It's funny. How do you pronounce it? What's the correct way? Brendan in Palo Alto. Bobby in, I don't even know how to say that one. Moonlight Beach, California. Briggy in Pennsylvania. Good to meet you, Briggy. Good to have you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Anybody else? Names and locations. You guys are really with Trump. I'm K1 from Coney Island. Kenny Bass from Newton Grove. Connor Frines from Vancouver Beach. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Anybody else? Neil Fraser in Hong Kong. Very good. Very, very good. All right. Okay, so I always do the Rumble rants first. And this is going to be wild. This is going to be pretty wild because of the fact that there's a lot of them. There is a lot of Rumble rants that have come in. But that's okay. Leo Messi says, how to fix American education. Well, I am of the opinion that the idea that we're going to fix it with so-called school choice is a mistake, because the American education system is far more private than any other country. And that's one thing that, I've seen libertarians and others, they're always like, oh, American education's awful. And they compare American education to Europe. And then from there they say, oh, and that's why we should just totally privatize it. And charter schools don't do that much better than regular schools. For-profit schools run by private companies don't do much better. And, I really do think that, I think Briggy put it best, the idea that schools are funded by local communities, like local taxes, that's got to be gotten rid of. There's got to be some more equality of funding in education. That's the first thing. On top of that, the way we teach in this country is just messed up. I mean, many people have pointed out that the reason we don't have good scores in math, we don't teach kids math the right way, right? The way you're supposed to teach kids math, we don't teach them. a lot of things about American education are done very poorly, right? And the way kids are taught in other countries, including the developing world, even, is not good. So that's what I would say. Is I'd say that there's a real need for a fix from the bottom up. So there you go. Looks like Trump is taking suggestions for the cabinet. Oh, well, Hempcar says, well, suggest me, right? I'd be great in the Trump cabinet. Somebody ought to suggest me. I'm joking, of course, but hey, why not? Right. Maybe somebody will read it. I'm joking, but there you go. How to fix American education. You asked it twice. I gave you an answer. Scheinbaum is lifting up indigenous women's textile industry and launching it from the National Palace, which was the Aztec capital. Real feminism. Well, I like what I'm seeing out of the new Mexican president. I really do like what she's doing. I liked your predecessor, AMLO, and I think that she is an anti-imperialist. And I like what I'm seeing. I know you follow that very closely, Penny. And please keep doing so. If you would like to write articles for our website about the situation in Mexico, I think that would be very helpful. I know Penny is awesome, folks. I don't know if you know who Penny is. I think, it's been a while since I've been on here. This is Penny. Okay. This is Penny. Penny is a member of CPI, and we love you, Penny. And you are badass. Penny, you are badass. This is what Penny did. She lives in Minnesota. She's a member of the Center for Political Innovation. She came to our Chicago workshop. She's been in these chats for a long time. And Penny lives in the district of Ilhan Omar. And this is what she did.
I'd like to know, as American people, why you continue to support sending billions of taxpayer dollars to Nazis in Ukraine to start a nuclear war with Russia. China is not our enemy.
I need you to leave, please, ma'am.
China's not our enemy. Russia's not our enemy. No more money for rich men's wars.
Take your stuff.
No more money for rich men's wars. No more money for rich men's wars. No more money for rich men's wars. No more money for rich men's wars.
Point. It's a good point, Democrats.
Penny, you are a badass. We love you. We absolutely love you, Penny. You are a badass. You win the CPI Badass of the Year award for doing that. That is really cool. That was really awesome. Penny, awesome. You deserve an award. Penny, good work. Great work. Excellent work. We love you, Penny, and we love your work to oppose imperialism and to fight for working families. So just wanted to share that. Penny is, God bless you, Penny. Very cool. Need this energy going forward. Everyone loves you, Penny. Based. Penny versus the imposter. Big up, Penny. Awesome. Good stuff, Penny. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. What else? Looks like Trump is taking suggestions for the cabinet. It just kept repeating those super chats. Okay. All right. Next, you guys shot an arrow 4 years too early, but it's dealt a death blow to the beast. Well, I don't know if I would put it that way. We were ahead of the game on Kamala Harris. When I researched Kamala Harris, after I got a tip of information about her dad being a communist, I just started researching and I immediately understood what was going on. And I read about the Hillary Clinton State Department. And I read about personality theory. And I read about mind control and CIA. I read about Project MKUltra. I knew exactly what was going on. And I wrote the book. 4 years early. And I mean, I was right. I knew they were going to try their hardest to get her into office, even though the American people did not want her. So, yeah, I wrote the book. When you say shot an arrow, I'll tell you, the day that Donald Trump won the election was July 13th. That was July 13th, right? That was the day that Donald Trump took a bullet in the ear. I think Donald Trump should have changed his campaign theme song to the William Tell Overture. Because I don't know if you guys know, right? If you ever watched The Lone Ranger, the old cowboy movie, cowboy TV show, right? You know, they have that piece of music. That piece of music, the William Tell Overture. Well, that actually comes from a legend of a hero, I think of, where was it? Switzerland? Yeah, Switzerland. A legendary folk hero of Switzerland, William Tell. And William Tell was a great archer. And the story goes that this evil tyrant got William Tell's son and put an apple on his head. He said, if you can shoot the apple off the top of his head, I will let you go free. And William Tell was such a good archer. He shot the apple off the top of his head, and the kid got to go free. And that's what that song, that's the William Tell overture in honor of the folk hero of Switzerland, William Tell. And I think that should have been Donald Trump's campaign theme song, because of the fact that, you know, he, just like an apple getting shot off the head with an arrow, Donald Trump, you know, took a bullet in the lobe of his ear. It was that close. And then, so first, some kid who will never live to tell the tale, who mysteriously got way too close to Donald Trump, that was the real magic bullet. Yeah. Never lived to tell the tale, Crooks or whatever his name was. But then after that, a Ukrainiac, a literal Ukraine activist, a guy who worked for the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, who a criminal who got recruited by somebody to go to Ukraine and become like a volunteer for the Ukrainian military. He came back to the United States and he tried to kill Donald Trump on his golf course. And I mean, it was pretty obvious the deep state was moving against Trump. And when Trump survived that assassination attempt, at that point, I thought, when he survived the bullet through the ear, and at that point, I thought, the American people, they love the underdog. And Donald Trump is the underdog. Donald Trump was the underdog, and the American people are going to vote for him. He's won the election. I thought that the day that happened, I thought he won the election. I thought it's over. Like, the election's over. I think he won. And that was my instinct. I said, it's over. He's won. And I was right. I was right. I mean, he won. I mean, I think Trump won the election on July 13th. That said, I think, how do I want to put this? I want to put this in the right way. I want to be careful about how I say this. I don't think Iran is trying to kill Donald Trump. I don't think that this plot to kill Trump from Iran that we're hearing about in U.S. media, I don't think that's the truth. I think that is Israeli war propaganda. I think that because Trump is so popular and because Trump, won the election, they want to make Trump believe that he has to be a big supporter of Israel and then Iran is his enemy. However, I will say that I do think there are probably many people in the Iranian government who do want to kill Trump. I mean, who think it would be justified to kill Trump because Trump murdered Qasem Soleimani. And that, if somebody killed a top general of America, right, who was also a national celebrity, you can bet there'd be a lot of people in the American military and the American government that would want to kill the person who did that. I think Iran would be really, 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 really stupid if they moved against Trump that way. That would be like the stupidest thing Iran could do right now. And I think Iran knows that, especially because the current president they have is not a hardliner. And I think it would be really, really, really stupid on Iran's part to try and kill Trump right now. But I think there are probably a lot of people in Iran who are really, really enraged by the activity that Mike Pompeo pushed Trump to do. Mike Pompeo and John Bolton pressured Donald Trump to do something really wrong and murder Qasem Soleimani. And because of that, a lot of Iranians who Qasem Soleimani was their hero. Qasem Soleimani was the symbol of their national pride. He was the top general of the country, the top celebrity in the country. A lot of Iranians in their guts, every time they hear Trump's name, they're going to think, "Grr, that bastard." Well, I don't agree with them. Obviously, I think any of them that have common sense about how the world works would realize that if they were to move against Trump that way, it would be like the worst thing possible for Iran. But at the same time, the fact that a lot of them want to do it shouldn't be surprising. I mean, again, think about the circumstances. So I want to be nuanced about this, right? I want to be nuanced about this. I don't want to pretend that there isn't vicious hatred for Donald Trump in Iran and that there's not a desire for vengeance on the part of millions of Iranians. There is. That said, I also think that the Iranian government isn't stupid. And that, if they were to move against Trump that way, that would be just handing a gift to Israel, right? Donald Trump wins the election as the American people rally around him to oppose war. And then they do that. No, they're not that stupid. They're not that stupid. They're not that stupid. I don't think they're telling us the truth about Iran wanting to kill Trump. I don't think that's the truth. I really don't. I think, well, let me put it this way. They're not telling us the truth about Iran trying to kill Trump, about wanting people's desires. Yeah, after the murder of Qasem Soleimani, you can bet there's a lot of people in Iran that have vengeful feelings against the president, against our upcoming president, our president-elect. I mean, and to deny that would be a foolish thing. But the idea that they would act on it at this time, which would be like the worst thing, it would not serve, it would be a gift to Israel and it would not serve their interest at all. Don't think that's going to happen. Alrighty. Regarding Iran, do you think that the Guardian Juris systems in Iran is similar to the Soviet Politburo or the Central Committee in terms of structure and governance? Now, is the guardianship of juris, is that the Guardian Council? Let me make sure that I'm not, right? I'm not, the guardianship of juris is a concept in 12er Shia Islamic law, which holds that until the reappearance of the infallible imam, that the Muslim world should be administered by righteous Shia jurists. Right? So this is a religious concept. Right? Now, is this, I know in Iran, so this is a conversation that I actually had in Iran, which was quite interesting when I was over there, right? Is that when I was in Iran, many people pointed out, they said to me, you know what, Caleb, Iran, we are not a pure democracy. We're not. They said, we are not a pure democracy. We are a guided democracy. The people get to vote for who the president is, and, the people get to vote for the president, and, the people participate, but their participation is guided by the Guardian Council, which is a group of religious leaders who led the revolution to overthrow the Shah. And their position, their position is that, their job is to guide the political system, approve the different candidates, make sure they're in line with the principles of the revolution. When I was in Iran, I remember I sat down with a cleric, and he said to me, we are not a guided democracy. We are not a pure democracy. We are a guided democracy, guided by our religious leaders. I said, and you in America, you're not a pure democracy either. You're guided by Wall Street, by the people who have all the money. Now, who should be the one guiding your democracy? Should it be the people who have all the money, or the people who led your revolution and broke your country out of imperialism? And I thought that was a great point, right? That, okay, we're supposed to be a pure democracy in the United States. What that leads to is whoever has the most money becomes the de facto leader. Well, in Iran, they're not a pure democracy. They don't pretend to be a pure democracy. But at the same time, they guide their democracy with a very powerful state that led an anti-imperialist uprising and organizes the economy and all of that. And that's what the Guardian Council is. It's this group that's there. It says, make sure that if you're running for president or you're running for the parliament, you have to be in line with the principles of the country, which we kind of have that here too, right? You have to, if you become elected to office, you are required to take an oath of loyalty to the American Constitution, right? Well, I mean, if you will not take an oath of loyalty to the American Constitution, you cannot take office. In Iran, you have to be, you don't just take an oath, you have to be proven to be loyal to their Islamic revolution and their system. Now, that's the way they do things in Iran. How is that similar to the Politburo? I mean, you could argue that the Guardian Council or the religious leadership of Iran is like the Soviet Communist Party, right? The Soviet Communist Party, they were the ones that ran the government and they approved or disapproved the candidates. But Iran is a little bit looser than that because the elections are contested. The way it tended to work, the old Soviet model of doing things, from what I understand, is that in every area, they would have these public meetings. The local Communist Party would have a public meeting to talk about who should be the government official. And these meetings went on for many hours late into the night. All kinds of people were there and they voted and debated and all kinds of things. And at the end of the day, the Communist Party would pick the candidate and then they would have a vote and people could go and vote yes or no for that candidate. And the candidate always won because they were the only one on the ballot. And is that democratic? Well, it's democratic in the sense that you're having a big meeting and that the Communist Party people are all getting together and wrangling and debating about it. But at the end of the day, the actual election is a yes or no. That's the old Soviet way of doing things that developed during the course of the Cold War, etc. Iran is not like that. It's a little looser in that the elections are contested. It's just the people on the ballot have to be approved by the Guardian Council. So it's a little bit different. Right, the Soviet Communist Party would pick one candidate, and then it was a yes or no vote. The Iranian Guardian Council approves at least two candidates, often 3 or 4 different candidates, and then it's whoever wins the vote who gets it. Iran's system is not as tight as the old Soviet system was. The Soviet system was highly controlled. Right, it was there was one party, the Communist Party. And that Communist Party, but this is something that I always want to point out to people. And this is people get a little bit mixed up about these things. I got to say this, right? What does democracy mean? Democracy means rule of the people. And I've got to tell you, Iran is more democratic than America is. And you're like, what? What do you mean? They don't have freedom of speech the same way we do in America. That's true. They don't. Oh, what do you mean? They don't have freedom of religion the same way we do. You're right. They don't. It's an Islamic government. Our government is neutral on matters of religion. You can be a Jew in Iran. You can be a Christian in Iran, but the government is pushing Shia Islam on you. What? There's a lot of reasons that Iran doesn't have as much freedom as we have. That they don't. But Iran is more democratic. Why? Why is Iran more democratic than America? Because the Islamic Republic would not be in power if it wasn't for a very, very well-organized population. In every neighborhood, every block, every apartment building, every rural farming area, everywhere, they have these things called Basij councils. And those Basij councils are ordinary people who get their instructions from the Islamic leadership, and they go around the neighborhood keeping track of every person, enforcing the rules and the proclamations that the Islamic leaders make. And if it wasn't for a very well-organized population, we're talking millions of people who every day wake up and think, all right, how can I do my best to carry out the supreme leader and the Ayatollah's agenda? If it wasn't for that, the Islamic Republic would fall. It depends on the population being well-organized and having their back. There is a huge amount of participation on the population, and the government carries out its wishes because the well-organized population carries it out. Whereas in our country, our leaders don't give a shit what we think. They just rule without us, right? We just sit here. We get to vote once every 4 years. They lock us out of politics and all of that. And I mean, the same in North Korea, the same in Cuba, the same in China. A lot of these countries that we think of as less democratic, I'm telling you, if you have a government that has emerged in opposition to imperialism, the only way that government stays in power is it's organizing a lot of people to keep it in power. And in order to organize those people to keep it in power, it can't just tell them what to do. It has to give them what they want, right? And the Iranian government, every day they're sitting there, have the wages gone up, have living standards gone up? I mean, they're sitting there every day and calculating it. And I've seen this in Venezuela. I saw this in Nicaragua with the Citizens Power Councils. Anti-imperialist countries depend on the involvement of the population, because without it, they're done, right? If the United States government is against you and the people don't have your back, you're done. Right. And so if democracy means rule of the people, involvement of the people in the government process, I'm telling you, Iran is way more democratic than the United States, because people are way, way, way more involved in governing in Iran than they are here. And the same for China, the same for North Korea, the same for Cuba, the same for Nicaragua, Venezuela, these other countries. The people are way, way more involved in the governing process. Not the same level of freedom. Again, these countries are under attack. They're isolated. They're facing sanctions. They've got terrorists on their border. These are much more authoritarian countries, but it is the people that are heavily involved in the authoritarianism. And if you want those countries to be more free, trade with them, bring them into the global economy. Have them become trading and developing. The idea that you're going to make a country respect human rights. This is something that it annoys the crap out of me. It's like, oh, this country is violating human rights, so what we're going to do is we're going to sanction them. That'll teach them. What is a sanction? What is sanctioning? Sanctioning is saying, you can't do bank transactions with our bank. You can't buy products from us. We can't buy products from you. Well, folks, if someone can't do bank transactions in your bank, and someone can't buy a product from you, and someone can't sell a product to you, why should they listen to you? Think about it, right? I mean, it's like, if I didn't like my local butcher, and I went into his store and I said, "You bastard, I don't like the way you do your meat. And you better change the way you cut your meat. I don't like the way you cut your beef. I don't like the way you cut the pork. I don't like the way you cut your chicken. I don't like the way you butcher. So I'm becoming a vegetarian." And say, well, okay. Nice day. Have a nice day. I mean, it's like if you went into him and said, "Hey, I'll continue buying your meat if blank, blank, blank," he might listen to you. But if you walk into him and say, "All right, because I don't like the way you cut the pork and the beef, I'm never eating meat again. I'm becoming a vegetarian." He's going to say, "Okay, well, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because clearly you're not going to do anything for me." I mean, it's the idea you're going to influence these countries by sanctioning them is the dumbest thing ever. And what sanctions really are, it is not about trying to influence these countries to have more freedom and human rights. That's not what they're doing. It's about competition. That's what it is. It's that these countries are competitors. Iran, their oil used to belong to BP and ExxonMobil, and then they took control of their oil, and now they're selling oil in competition. We want to put them out of business. That's what it's about, right? China used to buy everything from us, and now China's making the best cell phones in the world, and so we put sanctions on China because we want to put them out of business. It's not because we want to influence them. Oh, if we put these sanctions on China, they'll respect human rights. No. You just want to put them out of business. They're competition. That's all it is, right? You've got your store across the street, and you want people to shop at your store, and they've got their shop across the street, and they're saying, well, in the interest of human rights, the city needs to build a giant wall around the other store. It's just for human rights. That store, they don't practice human rights, so the city needs to erect a giant fence around this store that's competing with me. It's a moral stand. It just must be. It's in the name of freedom and dignity. I am outraged by the practices at that store. So, city of New York, I own a bakery, and there's a bakery across the street, and the city of New York is morally compelled to build a fence around that other bakery and make it hard for people to go in there. It's not. It's what we do for freedom, guys. Oh, bullshit. Come on. Are we this stupid? No. No, we're not that stupid. We're not that stupid. Sanctions are economic warfare, and they're an attempt to put countries out of business, right? You prevent countries from doing bank transactions. You prevent countries from selling their products or buying their products. It's just about using the United Nations, using the banking system, using all these things as a mechanism to protect the monopoly of the very same big corporations that are fucking over America right now. The very same people driving down our wages and destroying our communities. The very same people that destroyed all the small businesses in your community and built a giant Walmart for low wages. They want to do the same thing to Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and all the other countries that compete with them. This is the game the evil monopolies play. And in the long term, it's hurting us because the US dollar, one of the main ways they hurt countries is they deprive them of the ability to use the US dollar. Well, increasingly, big chunks of the world like Russia and China and they're just not using the dollar anymore. And there's the BRICS economy, and they're creating a new and the result of this is if less people use the dollar loses its value. That's what happens. The dollar loses its value. And that's what's going to happen as a result of these stupid sanctions we put on countries, right? We think that we can just, punish countries. You can't use the dollar. You can't use the... And increasingly, countries are just saying, okay, we won't use the dollar. And the people we do business with will just not use the dollar. And the dollar is being used less and less and less. And with the dollar being used less, the value of the dollar is going to decrease. I mean, we're losing out. So eventually, you worry about inflation. The value of a currency is based on how widely it is used. And the result of these sanctions in the long term is our dollars not having value. So anyway, I could talk about that all night. So thank you for that question. Because a Bonapartist is now in charge, the most dangerous enemy is now any social democrat or leftism. According to R. Palm Dutt, they will repeat their roles in fooling the masses this time. That's an interesting question, right? I mean, you kind of have a point. And we have a study group in CPI. We're actually reading the R. Palm Dutt book, Fascism and Social Revolution. We're in the process of printing our own edition of it. It'll be out soon. We had to make some adjustments, but in that book, he talks about divisions in the ruling class and all of that. This is my position. Aligning with social democracy or the so-called left or the so-called right is based on what is best at the time. We have no loyalty to the imperialist left or the imperialist right, but we might align with either one based on what is strategic at the time. And that was always the communist position. That was the way communists used to be. During the 1930s, right? During the early 1930s, when the Great Depression hit, the communist parties of the world focused on opposing the left, social democracy. They said social democracy was the main danger. They called it social fascism, and they mobilized against social democracy. And at the same time that they were mobilizing against social democracy, Stalin started courting conservatives, conservative industrial capitalists. Henry Ford was invited to the Soviet Union, and he set up factories. And Stalin basically, the big capitalists, the Rockefellers, the ultra rich were boycotting the Soviet Union. They were sanctioning and barricading the Soviet Union. And there were a lot of what they called captains of industry, like guys like Elon Musk, kind of, free-willing capitalists who didn't go along with the rest of the club, who said, you know what, we're going to do business with the Soviet Union anyway. And one of those people was the Koch brothers' father, Fred Koch, and he was a chemist. And he said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to do business with the Soviet Union anyway. So Stalin hired him, and he set up the Soviet oil industry. Henry Ford went over to the Soviet Union. A couple other corporations. And there were a number of industrialists who didn't follow the rules, and they were conservatives. Henry Morgan and General Electric. They were right-wingers, conservatives, and they said, you know what, if Stalin will hire us and we'll make money, screw it. And so Stalin mobilized the communist parties to focus on fighting the left, fighting the Social Democrats. And at the same time, Stalin started doing business with the conservatives. Then what happened? Well, the conservatives, the industrialists, they wanted to crush the labor unions. So in Nazi Germany, they came to power and they set up a brutal anti-communist dictatorship and crushed the labor unions. And then they flipped and they started aligning with the Social Democrats. And they said, okay, fascism is now the main danger. So they started aligning with the Social Democrats and they started fighting the right, because the right were the ones that were sympathetic to fascism. And it was a flip. Both policies were correct. It was correct in the early 1930s to focus on opposing the left and align with the right. And it was correct in the late 1930s to align with the left and oppose the right. And it's just based on what's best at the time. And the problem, and the reason I don't want to be a communist anymore, is because communism is considered part of the left. I mean, I'm not part of the left. I have no loyalty. My willingness to work with the left or the right is based on my principles of anti-imperialism. And at some points, the left might be better to work with to promote anti-imperialism. And sometimes the right might be better to work with. And I have no loyalty to either of them. I have my own principles. I believe in anti-imperialism and a rationally organized economy, and I'll work with either one based on what's best. But during the 1930s, the communists, the late 1930s, the communists aligned with the left. And then they fought against the Nazis during World War II, and the communists built up a lot of street cred in the name of anti-fascism. And after World War II, that just became a law. It was a tactic. Supporting Roosevelt was correct, and it was a tactic. And aligning with the Soviet Union, aligning with the United States against Nazi Germany, that was correct, and it was a tactic. But afterwards, it just became this rule that you always support the left, and the right are always the main danger. And that's not true anymore. And it wasn't true in the early 30s. In the early 1930s, the left was the main danger. And then that flipped with the rise of Hitler. And, and when it flipped, they changed, right? And that, who knows? Who knows? For all I know, I mean, God, well, I'm not going to say this, but hypothetically down the road, you could imagine that we had another Dick Cheney president. We had another George W. Bush administration that was from the right. And so if the American people were opposing imperialism and opposing the low-wage police state and rallying against a right-wing government in the name of left-wing ideals, I would align with them as a left, with the left against them. But it wouldn't be because I'm a leftist. It would be because I'm against imperialism, because I'm for American working families. Right now, American working families are rallying against the left around a right-wing president, Donald Trump, right? They're rallying around Trump to oppose imperialism and to fight to raise their living standards. So I'm aligned with the right. But at the end of the day, my principles are my principles. Trump supports Israel. I don't, right? Trump says a lot of things I don't agree with. But right now, he represents the American people being in motion in opposition to imperialism. So I'm on Trump. I'm with Trump. But who knows? Trump could change, and I might change my orientation toward Trump. I don't know, right? I don't know. But the idea that we should permanently be loyal to the left, wrong. Right. And that's what I get from Dutt. Right. If you read the Fascism and Social Revolution book by Dutt. Yeah. He's like, we have our own agenda. Social democracy and fascism are two sides of the same coin. Right. And that, that they are just two tactics to try and save capitalism from the long-term economic crisis, etc. And the Dutt book is very good. The main point that the Dutt book makes is that capitalism enters this long-term crisis of overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, and that in this crisis, the main way that capitalists try to resolve the crisis is with driving down consumption and driving down living standards, destruction of the productive forces. That's the point. That's the point that is made. So, yeah. So there we go. There we go. So Yeah. Okay. So Penny says, why was the New York government afraid of squirrel and a raccoon? Rest in power, Peanut and Fred. Maga has avenged you. I did see that about the squirrel. The man that's weird. They have very weird laws in New York about pets, right? Because I think it's because people live so close together in New York City. They do live so close together that the kind of pets you can have, like, if you live in an apartment building, especially, studio apartments, and you've got a pet, that could quickly become the problem of the whole building. I think that's what the issue. That's why the rules are so tight. I will say that I used to know in another life. I mean, he probably is not a big fan of me now, but in another life, I was friends with the only man in New York City history who was ever arrested for owning a live alligator. Right? This guy is a legend, right? And maybe he's out there. I'm sure he disapproves of me. I'm sure he hates Donald Trump or whatever. But there's a communist in New York City named Mike Gimbel. And Mike Gimbel is a mathematics genius. He was the writer for the New York Knicks. He was their sports statistician for years. Never graduated college. He was just a math genius. He's like a math whiz. And he got the job. And he says, I was Moneyball before Moneyball. And you can look him up. I mean, he's a famous sports statistician named Mike Gimbel. And Mike Gimbel is also the only person in New York City history to have ever been arrested for owning a live alligator. Right? He lived in Harlem. And he and his wife, they had an alligator in their apartment, a full-sized live alligator. And apparently he would bring it to the school in the neighborhood, and the kids would see the alligator. And it was a thing he would do. And it was just for years he owned this live alligator. But one of his neighbors called the police, and he was taken from his home in handcuffs for owning a live alligator. Which is a crime in New York City. So there you go. Is it a crime in other states to have a live alligator? I don't know. But I will say I was in a certain communist group with Mike Gimbel, and Mike Gimbel was expelled from the group because he wrote a book about physics that they didn't agree with. And Mike Gimbel, I know nothing about physics, okay? I know absolutely nothing about physics, but I still have his book somewhere in this apartment. It's like over there on the shelf. He wrote a book arguing that the new physics of Einstein is invalid. And he's not the only person to believe that. There's a very popular book that he quotes in his book, a very widely read book, I should say, called The Big Bang Never Happened. And I've interviewed the author of that book because he's the head of fusion energy research in New Jersey. His name is Dr. Eric Lerner. And Dr. Eric Lerner, who is a communist, and he was also part of the LaRouche movement when it started, and then he separated, and now he's a follower of Rosa Luxemburg. He's like a Luxemburgist. Dr. Eric Lerner, who, is a very well-respected physicist. He's hired by the state of New Jersey to do fusion energy research. He's the top in his field. He maintains that Einsteinian physics is not legit, right? That physics, the physics that started with Einstein is not legit. He is for the old physics. He rejects the new physics. So Mike Gimbel wrote a book called, it's still on Amazon, you can buy it, Dialectical Materialism versus the New Physics, which I read. And it's the only book on physics that I have ever read. So I have no basis on which I just know nothing about it. And if I start opening my mouth about whether he's right or wrong, I'm going to look like a fool, even to people who agree with him, because I just don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not a science guy, not a physics guy. But in that book, he basically argues that the new physics is not science, that it's not mathematical and it's not scientific, and that the Big Bang, entropy, the concept of an end to space, an end to time, these are religious principles that somebody thought up and inserted into physics for political reasons. That's what he argues. And that's what Dr. Eric Lerner also believes, that There's no end to time because time is just a measurement. There's no end to space because space is just a measurement. This is what he argues in the book, that the Big Bang never happened and entropy is never going to happen. And that, there is no end to time. There is no beginning to time. There is no end to space. There's no beginning of space. That's the kind of thing he argues in the book. So I don't know if you know anything about physics or feel that you're qualified. I would be curious if you read the book, if you could give me, if you know anything about this, you could give me your opinion. I will say that, there were a number of people in the Workers' World Party who read the book and were furious, got angry, people who studied physics. And I mean, it caused a lot of drama. And I honestly feel that he got the short end of the stick. I mean, they were not nice to him. He was somebody who'd been with them since the early 60s. He's a mathematical genius, a respectable person, a man who's made great sacrifices. And, they could have just said to him, hey, man, we don't agree with your book, but, this is you, it's not us. But no, they turned it into a big thing. And it was really, and that's the problem with all these groups. And that's why, again, I'm just telling you, right? Again, you asked me why I'm not a communist. One of these things, democratic centralism does not work. It's part of why I'm not a communist. You cannot practice democratic centralism in our society. Democratic centralism says everyone must say exactly the same thing. Look, Peter Coffin and I, we're running CPI right now. We're the two leaders of CPI. He doesn't agree with me on a lot, right? He is much more in support of dialectical materialism. He is a dialectical materialist. I reject dialectical materialism outright. That's fine. We disagree, right? And that classic democratic centralist Leninist organizing says everyone in the group must say exactly the same thing. And I mean, that's just not viable, right? It was a problem when the Bolshevik Party was formed, right? Social democracy as a movement existed. And the way social democracy worked is that anyone who believed in 5 or 10 principles could join the Socialist or the Labor Party. And the way it worked was that there were pub presses, like that printed books that were privately owned. And whoever had the press, who owned the biggest book publishing company, the biggest newspaper publishing company, set the party line. And that was a problem because obviously people with more money were able to have more influence over the line. So when the Bolshevik Party was formed, they said we have only one party newspaper, and that party newspaper speaks for the entire party, and we wrangle about what the line is internally, and then we have official party voices that speak for the party, and we keep our debates internal. We have one face to the masses. That's called democratic centralism. And it was a way that the Bolshevik Party could have a lot of disagreement internally, but publicly they had one message to the masses, right? Now, CPI members voted for 4 or 5 different people. There's many different views in CPI, right? On many different questions. And in this day and age, with social media, with the look, I would love for every member of CPI to have their own YouTube channel and to say things on their YouTube channel that don't agree with me. There are certain principles I'd like you to agree with, and I'd like you to work with us around anti-imperialism, but I don't think hammering out the party line and making everyone adhere to the party line and all of their statements or be expelled, I don't think that's reasonable. Right? And that's basically what they did to this guy, Mike Gimbel. He wrote a book about physics, arguing that Marxism and dialectical materialism debunked physics, and they kicked him out of the group for that. No. Why? They didn't have to do that. They could just say, you know what? And that's the problem with democratic centralism. Democratic centralism worked in the Bolshevik times because they had to keep the group together, right? And they were fighting for their lives in military conditions. It was like a kill or be killed situation. And it's like, we're going to keep this group solidly together and we're going to march as one. And there was a real benefit to doing that because it was a kill or be killed situation, right? And so democratic centralism made sense to hold the group together, and it had a pretty clear benefit, right? Staying with the group was worth it, even if you didn't get your way, right? Even if the group went against what you wanted, for the sake of staying together and being in the group, you stayed in. However, nowadays, why should you be in a group? Why? What's the benefit? Well, because the group gives you fulfillment. You may have friends in the group, but there's really, it's not like people are compelled for military reasons to stay in the group. So if the group is demanding that if you disagree and you lose out in an argument, you have to say things you disagree with, and then people just say, see ya. And what democratic centralism has led to in America is that groups are all centered around one person. And that one charismatic person gets their way on everything. And if somebody disagrees with them, they argue about it internally. And the one charismatic person that has the most followers overrules the other person. And then that person says, oh, I'm just going to start my own group. See ya. And they leave. And that is the exact opposite of what it was meant to do. When Lenin formed the Bolshevik Central Committee, the idea was that it got Zinoviev and Bukharin and all these people into one place to combine their strength. And there was a real payout because they were in a military situation. By staying united, they could accomplish things. In a non-military situation, demanding that people adhere to democratic centralism creates a situation where there's one smart person in the group who's allowed to think things. And if you disagree with that person, you get outvoted, and then you say adios. And that's why there's a million tiny little irrelevant communist groups in the United States, right? And that it kind of forces parties to deteriorate into being fandoms. And, we're not fooling around with democratic centralism. There's no point in it, right? I mean, it's just like CPI exists to get shit done. The Center for Political Innovation exists to get shit done. There is an urgent need to build a real anti-imperialist movement, right? We don't need a fandom. We need a real anti-imperialist movement. And if you look at the timeline of stuff we have done this year, we have done a lot to build a real anti-imperialist movement. That's why we exist. And if again, calling ourselves communists at this point would hinder us from building a real anti-imperialist movement. So we're not doing it. Practicing democratic centralism would hinder us from building a real anti-imperialist movement. So we're not going to do it, right? We need to, anything that prevents us from doing what urgently needs to be done. Like, you don't realize how urgent this situation is. This is the best of times, but the worst of times. And Trump's victory gives us a real opportunity. But if this opportunity is squandered, we could be in a really bad spot very soon, right? If Trump doesn't deliver and make things better, if the American people aren't shown the benefits of moving in a better direction, we could be in a really bad spot really quick. And if we don't act now and seize the moment and try to get good things done for good reasons, if we don't do that, and playing dress up like your favorite revolutionary, oh, I'm going to do it exactly as the Bolsheviks did, that doesn't help, right? And I just, I really have no desire to play dress up anymore. I really don't. But anyway, I'm rambling. The point has been made. All right. So now we have done all of the Rumble rants. So now we're doing super chats. We might have defeated Kamala Harris, but Donald Trump just appointed Martin. No, he didn't. He might, but that's the rumor, but it's not confirmed. And Marco Rubio, I'm certainly not a fan of his, but not confirmed. Not confirmed. Who is confirmed? Matt Gaetz. Who is confirmed? Tulsi Gabbert. Now, the Senate still has to confirm them, but Donald Trump did officially appoint Tulsi. He did officially appoint Matt Gaetz. He did officially appoint his UN ambassador, but that's just a rumor. Marco Rubio is not a good dude. I'll just tell you that much. And, we'll see. We'll see. Neil Frazier says, welcome back. Well, thank you, Neil. I'm glad to be back, and I hope that I'm on here as much as I possibly can. We've got a lot to catch up on, and there's a lot of exciting things happening. It looks like there's a very exciting development from CPI that's probably going to happen tomorrow. Might be Friday, but I'm thinking it'll be tomorrow. I don't know, right? We're just going to have to see, but there's something very exciting in the works. The next 90 days are going to be amazing. They are going to be absolutely amazing for our organization. We are swinging into action to get real shit done. It's awesome. And I am really proud of how our organization, people have stepped up to get stuff done. We've made a real plan. We're marching forward. I'm really happy about that. Yeah, there we go. All right. The Uhuru movement is performing a reenactment of the trial for those who missed it. Very good. Now, I'm going to click on that link. Maybe we can show that on a future stream. That might be a good thing to do. If we could show this reenactment on a future stream. Let me see. I'm going to click that link, John, because the Uhuru movement, we want to do everything we can to support the Uhuru movement. I mean, it is like the most important case, right? If they can outlaw being an anti-imperialist, we are in a huge, huge, huge amount of danger. Because anti-imperialism are us, folks. That's what we do. So this is what Talkify. Oh, we can't. It's a reserve your seat thing. Okay. All right. We can't show it on here, right? Well, there's a link. I'll put the link in the chat. It's a link, and John put the link there, but I'll put the link in the chat. Anything to support the Uhuru movement. They're doing a reenactment of, so I'll put reenactment of Uhuru trial, and then I'll put the link, and I'll put it here in the chat on YouTube, and I'll put it in the chat on Rumble. So we may be streaming during that time, but there you go. All right. Reenactment of Uhuru trial. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Reenactment of Uhuru trial. Very good. That's a creative thing to do. I never would have thought of reenacting a trial. There's a whole summary at the link. Well, there you go. There you go. All right. All right. There's people who do Civil War reenactments. There's people who do Revolutionary War reenactments. And there are also those who do Uhuru trial reenactments. Just kidding. Just kidding. But the costumes are pretty normal. People just wore suits and ties. So you don't have to wear a blue or a gray uniform. You don't have to wear a tri-cornered hat for your reenactment. You can just wear a suit and tie. I'm being facetious. That was a thing. Do people still do that? I think they can't do it anymore because now if you're a Confederate, that's a racist thing. So you can't really do you can't do Civil War reenactment. When I was a kid, that was a really big thing. That was like a hobby that men would develop. They'd become Civil War reenactors, right? And they would go to some place and they would dress up in blue and gray uniforms, and they would practice the Civil War, and they would have guns with blanks in them, and they would just do the Civil War. That was like a big trend that people did. They just played dress up. Yeah, it was a thing, right? I remember that. And they didn't just do Civil War reenactment. There was Renaissance fairs that were like Middle Ages reenactment. And then there was a thing like that the people did. It was like they were reenacting like the time period of the Revolutionary War. And I don't know. It was just a thing people used to do. Do people still do that? Do people still do Civil War reenacting? I mean, that's what cosplay is, right? Or LARPing, right? Live action role play. I guess now people don't dress up as Civil War soldiers or the Renaissance. They dress up as anime characters, right? Or they still do Renaissance fairs. I don't know. I don't pay attention to these things. Oh, they do still do it. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not the only one. I remember. Yeah, but I guess, yeah, I a couple years ago, I went to something at the New Yorker Hotel, and there was an anime convention happening. And I'm just like walking through the New Yorker Hotel, and there's a bunch of kids dressed up and adults dressed up as their favorite anime characters. And I'm like, is this for real? And yeah, that is. And there was these people do these things. So people do these things. All right. They sure do that thing. Kamala is gone. Yes, Gala, you're awesome. And thanks for checking in on me while you're away. I did make a point of replying to people who reached out to me. And, sometimes you have to take a break. I needed to take a few days before the election and after to just kind of get my bearings in order and to get the new website together and get everything together. But there we go. Can Trump end the Ukraine conflict? I sure hope so. I really hope so. And that seems to be everyone he's appointing so far. I mean, not Marco Rubio, but he hasn't been appointed, right? That's not confirmed. But, you know, Tulsi wants that. She wants that. Matt Gaetz wants that. The UN ambassador lady, she's a big Zionist, but she also wants that. I mean, it seems like, you know, the Maga wing, they're pretty adamant, right? They are pretty adamant that I went to a Civil War reenactment. I was captured by the Confederate soldiers. Oh my God, Bree, you're gonna have to tell me that story sometime. I don't even know how to process that. That is insane. But you're gonna have to tell me that story sometime over coffee or something. That's wild. I want to hear about this. This could be this is a short story you need to write for a newspaper or a blog or something. That's wild. But anyway, yeah, I sure hope so. I sure hope so. Have you seen Joe Rogan's interview with J.D. Vance? I have not. And I will tell you, I don't trust J.D. Vance. I really don't. I mean, they made him famous for Hillbilly Elegy, and Hillbilly Elegy is not really supporting low-income people. It's, so I don't know. I don't trust J.D. Vance. I'll just tell you that much. Believe in science. I do. Secularity, democracy, humanity, materialism, innovation, productivity, proficiency, profitability, and positivity. Have faith in Jesus. That's a lot of things there, Anway. But I tend to think all of those things are good things. So there you go. All right. Does the current Chinese electoral system function like the old Soviet model? I think it does. Where the Communist Party has public events where they wrangle out who the candidate's going to be, but then it's kind of a yes or no vote. I think that's the way they do things, but I don't know. I also do know that there are smaller other political parties in China. They're very, very, very small, but they do exist, and that the Chinese government does make a point of making sure that there are a couple other parties represented in the government. Like there's they call it the left Kuomintang, and there's the Peasant Party, and so there you go. There are a couple smaller parties in China that do have seats. I will add that J.D. Vance appears to be good on Ukraine. He does sound good on Ukraine. I just don't know how sincere he is in anything. But maybe he'll win me over. I don't know. Maybe he'll win me over. But, man, I got to say, the Democrats really, I just can't get over. Trump had a rally in Madison Square Garden. Do you know who did that 80 years ago? The Nazis. I mean, that was the stupidest thing. And, Trump, I mean, it got so bad. The Democrat campaign. And I mean, when Kamala Harris said, I think that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are weird. It's like, what is this, 5th grade? Do they have cooties? They are weird. Weird? What does that even mean? They're weird. And that was, she would say the line with this like giggle in her eyes, like, it's a little weird. It's like, like she was like an elementary aged girl, as she said it. It's weird, and it was just like, that's an argument. And how are they weird? What was weird about them? Like, I mean, they never specified what was weird. It was just like this vague insult. It's weird. It's weird. Okay. I mean, that was just like the height of juvenility. And it's just like, okay, so if Trump is weird and Kamala Harris is normal, I don't want to be that kind of normal, And Tim Walz was certainly weird. Tim Walz was a very, very weird individual. I'll just tell you that much. You look into his history. There's some weird there, Why, I mean, I'm all for, people being who they are. And obviously there's, people are allowed to have associations. But what football coach? I mean, I'm sorry. I grew up in a small town in America, right? I really did. I grew up in a small town in America, and small towns are how they are. But he's from a small town in Wisconsin or Minnesota, which I like, who cares? But either Wisconsin or Minnesota. I don't remember what state he's from. He's from a small town, and he's a football coach, and they're making a big deal. They're calling him Coach Walz, Coach. He's just like your small town coach. Was the small town coach in your town the head of the gay and lesbian club at your high school? That was, I'm like, wait a second, hold up. Like, and did he, go on his honeymoon to China? Like, you look at Tim Walz, that was a pretty weird guy, right? And they wanted to make him out like he was just this football coach and all of that. And it was just like, wait a second, hold up. There was a lot of stuff about him. He was not Coach Walz. He was not your small town football coach by any means. The more you started digging into who Tim Walz was, he was very, very abnormal. I'm not going to say weird, but like, again, the football coach runs the gay and lesbian club. That's not what football coaches do generally. Right. And then, he gets married in China while the high school kids are with him. Like, that doesn't make any sense. The whole thing, that was weird. I said weird. There you go. So I'm just as bad as Kamala now. I said weird. I shouldn't have said weird. Anyway. All right. Is the Russian economy a good example of Keynesianism? Can the USA learn from this? No, Russian economy is not an example of Keynesianism, because Keynesianism is the government spending money. The Russian government does spend money, but what makes the Russian economy work is that the government owns the major energy companies, and it uses the energy revenue to stimulate the economy overall, and it uses the money to plan the economy. It gives money to businesses based on what they need the economy to do. Putin developed his theory. He studied the concept in dirigist economics of national champions. But I mean, the foundation, let's be real. Putin got his economic education in the Soviet Union. He studied Marxist economics, but then he also compared it to dirigist economics, which is French nationalist economics, and he studied dirigism, and he wrote extensively about dirigism and the concept of in dirigist economics, which is like French nationalist economics. Charles de Gaulle, the state builds up certain corporations and uses those corporations to stimulate the overall economy. So it's the Russian economic model is, communism is like the foundation of it, because that's what the whole country was during the time of the Soviet Union. And Putin is also he very much studied Deng Xiaoping, right? And Deng Xiaoping's daughter and Putin are friends. And, Putin very much studied China and why China didn't fall like the Soviet Union. And he's very influenced by China. And he wrote his academic thesis about the concept of national champions, corporations that are beneficiaries of the whole country, drawing from Charles de Gaulle and dirigist or French nationalist economic theory. So there's a lot of different influences there, but it's not Keynesianism. Keynesianism is the idea that the government must spend money because of underconsumption. Right? The idea is it repudiates. Marx says the problem is overproduction. The capitalist is churning out more products than the worker can afford to buy. There's not enough wages paid out. Well, Keynes argues, no. There's plenty. It's not there's too many products. It's that the worker can't afford to consume it, right? And apparently that was a big divide. So he says it's not overproduction, it's underconsumption. And then he says the solution to underconsumption is the government taxes and buys it itself or hires people. That's Keynesianism. The government spends a lot of money to stimulate the economy. What does it spend the money on? Keynesianism doesn't really care. Now, American school economics, Charles Henry Charles Carey and Friedrich List and all of that, they say that the government should spend money on infrastructure. That's what they argue, right? The government should spend money on bridges and highways and all of that. Keynes doesn't get into that. He says the government, the classic Keynesian example is the government hires somebody to dig a ditch and then it hires somebody else to fill in the ditch. Keynes just says, got to spend money. Doesn't matter what it's on. And actually the military industrial complex, many people refer to it as military Keynesianism, right? And it props up the U.S. economy. They spend lots of money on buying bombs and tanks and weapons. So, so I don't think Russia is a Keynesian economy. The government in Russia spends a lot of money, but the money that, Russia has a flat tax. This is one thing that, a lot of conservatives in Russia, taxes are 10%. That's it. 10%, period. Right. And I mean, in America, you got this elaborate tax system. You're paying 30% and all this. Russia, 10%, period. Right. They don't tax and spend. They tax. I mean, there's a 10% tax, but it's flat. It's the same thing for everybody. And it's pretty low. The main way the government makes money in Russia is through oil and gas. The government sells oil and gas, and with the money, it uses that money to then pay for things, to prop up their industries, to create, to build schools and all of that. So it's not Keynesianism. It is absolutely not Keynesianism. So I would just say no. I would say absolutely not. Keynesianism is tax and spend to deal with underconsumption. Russia is the government owns the oil and the natural gas and makes money from it and then uses that money to subsidize and stabilize the rest of the economy. So completely different. There we go. Your read on J.D. Vance. Oh, I said it and I'll say it again. Don't trust him. Don't trust him. I like a lot of what he's saying about Ukraine, but me no trust Vance. But maybe he can win my trust. I'll give him a chance, right? I mean, look, he was clearly the right pick for Trump, right? He won the election with Trump, and so maybe he can be good. But hillbilly elegy and, the way he was at Harvard and his military background, and he seems pretty manufactured to me. He seems like I got questions there, but it's possible he could be. Who knows? And again, folks, it's not about the personality of the person. It's about the balance of forces. Roosevelt was from one of the most elitist, wealthy families in New York. And because of the balance of forces, he ended up being a champion of the American working class and an anti-fascist. And it was because of the balance of forces, right? Lincoln said he did not want to abolish slavery, but he ended up being known as the great emancipator because of the balance of forces. It's not about personalities. It's more about the balance of forces. And that's what you got to remember. All right. We are so back. Terry, you're awesome. And we are so back. I have never been more excited for the inauguration of a president. I'll just tell you this, Terry. You're my age. You might be a little older or a little younger. I don't know which one, and I won't say. But the 2004 election where Dick Cheney and George W. Bush were reelected, that was the first election I was very involved in. And I knew that John Kerry was awful. And but I was very devastated when Bush won that election because it was an endorsement of the way the country was moving. And the American people overwhelmingly were not supporting the way the country was moving. But through maneuvering or whatever, Bush got reelected in 2004. And Dick Cheney served a second term as vice president. And it was basically saying the Patriot Act, the invasion of Iraq, all of that was all okay. And I was very disgusted by it. And this election, Dick Cheney lost, baby. Dick Cheney lost. And I'll tell you, there's a reason that John Kerry lost and Trump won. And that's because John Kerry was running against his supporters. John Kerry did everything he could it was almost like John Kerry wasn't even trying to win. He was trying to psyop his supporters into becoming Republicans and Bush supporters, right? It was like John Kerry, his whole campaign, his platform, everyone was voting for him because they wanted him to end the war in Iraq. And his platform was to put more troops into Iraq. John Kerry supported the Patriot Act. It was like everything that people were voting for John Kerry against Bush to do, he was telling them not to do. And he had been an anti-war protester, but yet his whole campaign was about, he was a big hero in Vietnam and he killed the commies. And it was like his whole campaign was like, I can out Republican, I can out neocon and out Republican the Republicans. It was almost like a psyop on his supporters. And I remember being in line, I remember that election, I went to see John Kerry speak. And I remember I was in line and hearing people talk about, we need John Kerry, when Bill Clinton bombed Serbia, that was over in just a few days. That's the kind of leadership we need. Bush in Iraq, we're still there. He didn't get it done quick enough. And I'm thinking bombing Serbia was an awful, awful thing. But that was the kind of arguments that were being made. I also remember, I was more sympathetic to third parties. And I remember people saying, well, the great thing about America is we have a two-party system. That's what just makes it so amazing. I'm thinking, no, that is not amazing. Well, Donald Trump was the complete opposite of John Kerry. He ran against the candidate picked, the Dick Cheney approved candidate. And what did he do? Number one, he embraced third parties. He spoke at the Libertarian Party convention. That was awesome. He's friends with Angela McCardle, who's also my friend, who's the chair of the Libertarian Party. She's awesome. She's a friend of mine. She invited me to make sure that I got into the event where Trump spoke. She made sure, she specifically went out of her way to make sure I got credentials to go into Donald Trump's event with the Libertarian Party. Angela's awesome. Donald Trump invited her over for dinner, right? He embraced the Libertarians, right? The Democrats did everything they could to purge, third parties from the ballot. The Republicans embraced the Libertarian Party. Trump spoke at their convention, the first former president to ever speak at a Libertarian convention, right? John Kerry did everything he could to not sound like he supported Muslims. Donald Trump, even though he's super pro-Israel, invites Muslims on the stage and hugs them. Donald Trump did everything possible to empower his base. He realizes a lot of people want to vote for him because he's anti-war. Boom, puts RFK on the stage, puts Tulsi Gabbert on the stage. Donald Trump leaned in to all the reasons people wanted to vote for him. John Kerry ran away from all the reasons people wanted to vote for him. And that's why John Kerry lost to Dick Cheney. And that's why Trump beat Dick Cheney. Trump beat Dick Cheney by telling everybody, all the reasons you hate Dick Cheney, I love him, vote for me. And John Kerry lost to Dick Cheney by saying, I'm just like Dick Cheney. Don't worry. You like Dick Cheney? I'm just like him. I'm just like him. There you go. There you go. If you want to beat Dick Cheney, you don't try to sound like Dick Cheney. You find everyone else who hates Dick Cheney and you rally them. That's what you do. Was Deng Xiaoping an innovationist? What about Mao? Well, that's a good question. See, I maintain that innovationism is a new stage, right? This is a new stage of where anti-imperialism is at in our time. And Marxism-Leninism kind of, was part of it, laid the foundations, but was wrong on some points and all of that. Deng Xiaoping theory was really important for me to understand, because what is the basis of Deng Xiaoping theory? Deng Xiaoping repudiated the Gang of Four, right? So the final years of Mao's life, right? Mao, either the Cultural Revolution, which was an absolute disaster, but the founder of the Cultural Revolution was Lin Biao. Lin Biao was the author, the guy who compiled the Little Red Book, right? The Little Red Book, and the guy who compiled the quotations in the Little Red Book, the general Lin Biao, he launched the Cultural Revolution. But then Lin Biao tried to kill Mao and tried to overthrow Mao, and so he fled to the Soviet Union and his airplane crashed and he died. And so then Mao's wife and three guys and Mao's wife, they became the Gang of Four. And after the fall of Lin Biao, after Lin Biao tried to kill Mao, then the Gang of Four became the leaders. And the Gang of Four, one of their main principles is they said that they could achieve a higher stage in poverty, meaning that China could stay poor and achieve communism. The higher stage of communism could be achieved in poverty. And if they just were pure and they just made everything so equal, they could have pure communism in poverty. And that was one of their principles. And they argued that China in the early 70s was the most advanced society that had ever existed. And they started saying that they believed World War III and nuclear war was inevitable, and that 2/3 of the human race was going to die. They just went nuts in the final years of Mao's life. Mao's wife and the Gang of Four, they were nuts. And they said that 2/3 of humanity is going to die in nuclear war, and China is going to lead the world, and that China is the most advanced country in the world at the time, which it absolutely was not. It was like largely not electrified in many regions. And and they were nuts. And so after Mao died, Hao Guofeng came in, and Hao Guofeng was kind of Mao's appointed successor. But Deng Xiaoping got the military together, and they took power. And when they took power, they repudiated the Gang of Four, said that you could have communism in poverty. And they went back to Marx. And what did Marx say? Marx said, no. The basis of building an egalitarian society, from each according to his own ability to each according to his needs, is vast abundance. I quote this. I have quoted this on this stream many, many times, and I think I can find it again. I think I have to make it. Let me try to put it on the screen. Let me see if I can. Right? How does this work? If I can, let me try to put it on the screen. I may have to make it a PDF and make it a slide, but I will show you the quotation. And Deng Xiaoping, he was a Marxist. He had understood Marx, and he understood what is pretty basic Marxism, which is that you cannot have communism in poverty. All right, let me find the quote. I've quoted it many times on these streams because it's very, very important. I thought I had it on here. Let me see if do I have it somewhere else. I know I've put it on. I put it in a recent video I was editing. All right. Oh, here we go. Okay, so does it show it on the screen? That's the question. All right, let me see if I can get it to show it on the screen. Let's see if they've fixed StreamYard. Nah. Nope, they haven't fixed StreamYard. Okay, so let's make it a PDF. Export as PDF. And then we'll make it a slide. StreamYard. All right. Here we go. All right, now we'll put it on the screen. Now, this is what Marx said. It's being slow, And this is what Marx said. Right can never be higher than the economic structure of society and its cultural development conditioned thereby. In a higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and therewith the antithesis between mental and physical labor has vanished. After labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want. After the productive forces have increased and the all-around development of the individual, and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety, and society inscribe on its banners, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. So, only after you've created a vast amount of abundance, only when you've created a world where labor becomes life's prime want, meaning people work because they want to, because they don't want to be bored, only then can you have a society with full communism, where people just do what they feel like doing, from each according to his own ability, to each according to his needs. The only way, exactly, rights in any society right, can never be higher than the economic structure of society and its cultural development conditioned thereby. You could not have had freedom of religion and freedom of speech in medieval Europe. If you had done that, society would have fallen apart. The only reason anyone started talking about the rights of man and freedom of religion was because we reached a certain stage of economic development. And that the basis of the higher stage of communism, which is total freedom, right? You just do whatever you feel like doing and take whatever you need. The basis of that is vast abundance. And Deng Xiaoping said, look, the only reason we're having socialism here in China is to eradicate poverty and to rationally organize the economy so we can get rid of poverty. Poverty is not socialism. To be rich is glorious. That's what Deng Xiaoping said. That was the quote. And he said, look, the point of the Chinese Communist Party is to organize the economy to eradicate poverty. That's the point. And it's not, we cannot redistribute poverty. We cannot make people equal in poverty. And this notion that we can have full communism in poverty is a bunch of bull honky, right? And that was the basis of Deng Xiaoping's theory. And that's an important innovation. And so that is a big part of my political understanding, is that economic development is the road to freedom. Economic development is the road to equality. Economic development is the road to eradicating war, etc. And that I am not interested in making things equal, because equality can only come with abundance. As long as there's not enough to go around, some people are going to have and some people will have not. When there's enough for everybody, there's no reason to hoard. And that is a really, really important point. And Deng Xiaoping reiterated that because during the Cold War, the communist countries largely forgot about that, right? And that there were a number of very disastrous failed experiments of trying to create communism in poverty. One of them is, in Cuba, Che Guevara. He ran the economy in the first, 5 or 6 years of the Cuban Revolution, and he did not do a very good job. He was not a good economist. And he said that they could not have material incentives in Cuba, right? People wouldn't be rewarded for working harder. Why? Well, they would just out of the, he was going to create this new socialist man, and they were just going to work hard. And the Cubans, if you go to Cuba, they say that did not work. No, no. We do give material incentives. People who work harder get paid more, right? I mean, that's you have to do that. Stalin developed that. It's called Stakhanovism. The idea that people are just going to work out of the goodness of their heart didn't work. And in China, in the Cultural Revolution, they tried stuff like that. Oh, just work really hard just because. And no, people don't do that, right? In a situation of scarcity, when people have to work very hard, you better pay them for doing it. It's just there were a number of things in Pol Pot, year zero, and trying to have full communism in an agrarian, non-industrial society, right? This stuff from Marx is really, really important. And Deng Xiaoping reiterated that, and that is a big part of what we now call innovationism. I would say Deng Xiaoping was at the very end of the Cold War, the late 70s and early 80s. He was going, okay, where do we go from here? Innovationism is built on that foundation. He was functioning within Marxism, Leninism, and within Mao Zedong thought, but he was realizing that the Soviet camp was falling apart and that, they weren't going to last forever. And he was going, how can we do that? And he won the intellectuals of China back to supporting the party. And so Deng Xiaoping, to his credit, I will say Deng Xiaoping's foreign policy was not, invading Vietnam, not good. Aligning with the United States against various anti-imperialist countries, not good. So he's a mixed figure. But in terms of what he wrote about economics and what socialism means and all that, I think he was correct. Uhuru's Solidarity 24-hour reparations telethon on December 3rd. All right. Well, maybe tune in for that. I am headed to Florida in December. I already bought my plane tickets, already confirmed. I'm headed down there. I was at their Black is Back march, on Saturday, November 2nd. I'm waiting for the speeches from that rally to be posted so I can edit my video together. I hope that they're posted soon so I can edit. Hands off Uhuru. We need to be there for them. I'm going to be in the courtroom for their sentencing. I'm going to support the Uhuru movement. And it's the most important case. It is absolutely the most important case right now. They were found not guilty of being Russian agents, but yet they were charged with conspiracy. That doesn't make any sense. If you're ruling that what they did is not a crime, conspiring to do it is not a crime either by default. And that verdict should be thrown out. That judge should just throw the verdict right out. And I hope that he does that. And I wrote letters. I know we've all written letters to support the Uhuru defendants. I stand with the Uhuru movement, hands off Uhuru. So there you go. And on that basis, folks, I am going to put on the closing music. Yeah, we'll be back. We did about 3 hours tonight, and we'll be back. So I'm glad to be back, y'all. Stay tuned. It'll probably be tomorrow that CPI is going to do something very, very special. Not telling you what it is, and it might not happen tomorrow. It might take a little longer, but I think it's happening tomorrow. Not totally sure, but we'll see. All right. Good night. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.